Chapter 5067. If only Linny Bro was here, he'd have a way, Ziyu said suddenly. That's for sure. With boss Lin Yi's strength, that Xue Jianfeng isn't even worthy of carrying his shoes. And he's acting all high and mighty, asking sis-in-law Lingshan to come with him. He's just asking to die, Kong Xiaobo said angrily. But we don't have a way to contact Linny boss right now. Even if we wanted to write him a letter, we wouldn't be able to get him to come back. Chen Tian smiled bitterly. Water from afar can't quench thirst right now. We can only rely on ourselves for this. Right, we need to tell Senior Lin Dongfang as well. Maybe he'll have a way? Qikuan slapped his forehead. Right. Everyone nodded. Lin Dongfang's performance last time had left a deep impression on them. Dealing with a couple of sky-class full mastery was like child's play to him. Maybe he'd have a way to deal with this as well. Also, sis-in-law Lingshan, the spirit practitioner you mentioned just now. It sounds like the Archaic Alliance came up with an excuse. But if it's true, we might be able to do something about it, Chen Tian said thoughtfully. What do you mean? Lingshan didn't understand, and the others looked confused as well. Think about it. This Archaic Alliance is coming at us aggressively, and with our strength in the common world, we have no way to fight back at all. Even if they have a rule that says they can't disturb the order of the common world, rules are dead, and people are alive. As long as one of them wants to disturb the common world, they can just find an excuse to do so easily. That Xue Jianfeng is the one doing it, isn't he? Chen Tian said. That's right. It's obvious that he's using this as an excuse, Lingshan nodded. Using the fact that 2 disciples of the Archaic Alliance had died as an excuse to barge into the Supernatural Investigation Bureau. Not only did he force the secular world to investigate, he even took the opportunity to suggest recruiting disciples with outstanding aptitudes from the secular world. He even wanted Xue Jianfeng to leave with him. It could be seen that Xue Jianfeng's focus wasn't on this primordial spirit cultivator. This was purely an excuse. So, looking at the big picture, it's not just us, but all the practitioners in the common world are faced with 2 choices. One is to submit to the Archaic Alliance's tyranny and do whatever they say, Chen Tian analyzed. Isn't that too infuriating? Lingshan and the others frowned. They weren't as strong as them, but this was the common world. What right did the Archaic Alliance have to call the shots here? That's right, it's infuriating. If there's pressure, there'll be resistance. It'd be fine if the Archaic Alliance chose to go easy on us. But if they find an excuse to force things, I'm sure most of the powers in the common world won't be satisfied, especially the ancient sects and noble houses. Yu Bing nodded. It wasn't hard to understand. It was better to be the head of a chicken than the tail of a phoenix. These people used to be the masters of the common world, but suddenly they had to bend their knees and listen to someone else's orders. This wasn't something they could get used to in a short amount of time, unless the Archaic Alliance went all out and massacred all the powers in the common world. That was the only way they'd be able to intimidate everyone. Fortunately, there weren't any signs of that happening yet. Then we only have the second option. Of course, we don't have the strength to do that. So we can only try our best to work with them on an equal footing instead of obeying them without any principles. Chen Tian sighed. Equal footing? Is that even possible? Everyone couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. The premise of an equal cooperation was that both sides had to be on the same level. Although there were many cultivation powers in the mortal world, and all of them added together could be considered huge, they paled in comparison to the Archaic Alliance. There was practically no comparison. It doesn't sound very reliable, but it's not impossible if you think about it. Think about it. If the Supernatural Investigation Bureau were to unite all the powers in the common world, everyone would be on the same side. Even the Archaic Alliance wouldn't be able to let their guard down, right? Chen Tian said. That's right. That's a good suggestion. Usually, it's not very practical to unite all the powers, but this is a special situation. The Occult Investigation Department might be able to take the lead, Yu Bing agreed. All right, I'll discuss this with Chief Feng. We'll do it as soon as possible. Lingshan nodded, but was still a little worried. But even so, our individual strength is still too far away from the Archaic Alliance. It'll be hard for us to fight for the right to speak, right? After all, strength determined the right to speak. Being strong in the common world, they could at most guarantee a chance to talk. But when it came to specific matters, their individual strength wouldn't have the right to speak, and they'd still be at a disadvantage. To put it bluntly, a group of kids wouldn't be able to change their weak position in front of the adults. Even if they fought on the spot, they'd only get beaten up. Even if they fought for a chance to talk, they'd still be led by the nose by the adults. What if that primordial spirit practitioner is one of us? Chintian asked. Everyone froze at the words, only reacting after a long while. Yu Bing clapped his hands. Old Wu, you're good. Not bad, not bad. If that primordial spirit practitioner really exists, then he's definitely not from the Archaic Alliance. He's very likely a part of the common world. It's just that we've never paid attention to him before. Plus, he has a grudge with the Archaic Alliance, so it shouldn't be too hard to get him on our side. Since this primordial spirit practitioner can kill two of them, he must be very strong. I'm sure he'll be a threat even to them. That'll make things easier. Chikuan nodded. This was like a group of children suddenly appearing out of nowhere and being able to beat up the adults. Even if the adults still had the advantage, at least they wouldn't dare to be as unscrupulous as before. After all, if they really forced the other party into a corner, they would flip the table and get beaten up. You're right. Even if we can't find this primordial spirit practitioner, we still have Senior Lin Dongfang. At least we'll be able to hold the fort, Kong Xiaobo added. Chapter 5068. Linny wouldn't know whether he should laugh or cry if he'd heard this discussion. But he'd really have to give them a big thumbs up for their foresight. It had been 3 years, and Ling Shan and the others had matured quite a bit. They were able to keep their cool in a situation like this, and their strategies were organized and organized. They were starting to look like generals now. After the discussion, unless there was something urgent, everyone else stayed in the villa. This was a critical time, and it wasn't enough to just leave 1 or 2 people behind. They had to gather everyone's strength to defend the villa. After all, the Archaic Alliance's people were all Sky Dao practitioners, and any one of them would be powerful. Just the few of them alone wouldn't be enough. Ling Shan, on the other hand, went back to the investigation department to look for the primordial spirit practitioners while discussing with Tianlong. They were preparing to form an alliance of the common world sects, and the first thing she needed to do was to contact the ancient sects and warn them not to get into conflict with the Archaic Alliance. At the same time, she wanted to test out what the alliance would be like. The reactions of the ancient sects were almost the same, other than expressing their gratitude to the Supernatural Investigation Bureau for the reminder. They were somewhat ambiguous about the matter of unifying the front line. They also knew that at this point, uniting was the best choice. But after all, it was a matter of great importance, and the sects had to discuss it for a while. The most important thing was, who would be the leader after unifying the front line? In any alliance in the history of practitioners, fighting for power and profit was the mainstream. The investigation department was the best choice. And there wouldn't be much opposition from the common world or the hidden world. But these ancient sects were different. It was impossible to make them lower their heads unless someone as strong as Lin Yi came out. Ling Shan couldn't help but feel a little impatient. At this rate, she didn't know how long it'd take for them to form a united front, especially if the Archaic Alliance found out about this and split them up. That'd be even more troublesome. What Ling Shan didn't expect was that the Archaic Alliance was already making their move before she even had the chance to sound out the ancient sects. What? Something happened to Snowy Valley? Chen Tian and the others were shocked. I'm not too sure about the specifics, but they said that 2 Sky Dao practitioners came to cause trouble, wanting to forcefully take away the talented disciples from Snowy Valley. They got into a fight, and many people from Snowy Valley were heavily injured. Ling Shan said solemnly, a Heavenly Dao Realm expert? That means he's from the Archaic Alliance. As expected, he's ambitious. Everyone was filled with righteous indignation. Another message popped up, and Ling Shan's face changed drastically as she looked at it. Tang Yin's mother's injured as well. Those bastards. Everyone paled in fright, and a surge of anger filled the villa. Mrs. Tang had nothing to do with them, but she was Lin Yi's mother-in-law. Lin Yi had asked them to guard the house, and they couldn't even protect Mrs. Tang. How were they supposed to face Lin Yi in the future? No, we can't take this lying down. Let's go to Snowy Valley, Chen Tian said furiously. Alright, so what if it's the Archaic Alliance? So what if they're Sky Dao practitioners? As long as we fight with our lives on the line, we'll have a chance. The others were furious as well. But what about Meng Yao and the others? Ling Shan frowned. She couldn't take this lying down. But if they acted rashly and left Meng Yao and the others with no one to take care of them, it'd be too late for regrets. They looked at each other, and were about to discuss when a voice came from the second floor. Are you talking about those unconscious beauties upstairs? Don't worry, just follow me to the Archaic Alliance. Everyone was shocked when they saw this person walking down the stairs. They surrounded him, as if they were facing a great enemy. Chen Tian shouted coldly. Who are you? How did you get in here? Who am I? Didn't she introduce you? After saying that, the newcomer calmly sat down on the sofa, not paying attention to the group of heaven-rank great perfection heaven-rank experts. Everyone turned to Ling Shan, and her face was filled with shock and rage. Shui Jianfeng. She gritted her teeth. Chen Tian, and the others felt even more pressured. None of them expected Shui Jianfeng to appear in the villa all of a sudden, even walking down from the second floor. All these sky-class masters didn't even notice him at all. This strength was truly frightening. Why are you here? What did you do to Meng Yao and the others? Ling Shan asked, giving Ziyu and the others a look. Ziyu and the others rushed up to the second floor to check. Don't worry, I'm still a big disciple of the Archaic Alliance. I'm not that despicable. Those women are unconscious. What can I do to them? Shui Jianfeng said faintly. Is that so? Ling Shan and the others didn't really believe him. It wasn't until Ziyu and the others went downstairs and made sure that Meng Yao and the others weren't touched, that they breathed out in relief. Okay, I can answer your first question now. Why am I here? The reason is simple. I couldn't find you in the investigation department, so naturally, I had to come here myself. Shui Jianfeng said proudly. Ling Shan couldn't help but jump. As slow as she was, she'd already realized that she was being followed by this bastard. Ling Shan couldn't help but feel very vexed. She really was too careless. She knew that this guy was up to no good, and yet she still walked right into the villa. If something were to happen, she wouldn't be able to forgive herself even if she died 10,000 times. Actually, she was just overthinking things. With Shui Jianfeng's strength, it was extremely easy for him to follow anyone here. Unless she didn't come to the villa to meet with everyone, this was the inevitable result, and she couldn't be blamed at all. Alright, since you're here, give us an explanation. Last time you said that you wouldn't disturb the order of the common world. But now? Don't tell me you don't know what your Archaic Alliance did to Shuigu? Ling Shan said angrily. Chapter 5069. What do you mean? Ling Shan and the others all frowned. There's a lot of archaic sects coming to the common world for training, and I don't know which sect did this Shuigu thing you're talking about, but I'm sure that it has nothing to do with us. Shui Jianfeng's tone was as if he had nothing to do with this matter. He then said, You see, my temper can be considered very mild. I even gave you such a long time to consider the matter of the disciple selection. The others are all directly asking for you. Have you thought it through? I've said it before. I'm definitely not going to Archaic Alliance. What you're doing has already broken the order of the common world. Do you want to be enemies with all the sects in the common world? Ling Shan said forcefully. Enemies with the common world? Shui Jianfeng said with a surprised look on his face. What nonsense are you talking about, Miss Song? All the sects in the common world added together aren't even as strong as any of the archaic sects, so there's no possibility of us being enemies at all. Our Archaic Alliance has never seen the common world as an enemy, or the common world would have been destroyed long ago. So you're saying that the Archaic Alliance doesn't care about the common world at all, and whenever you see a disciple with good potential, you just take them away. Is that what you're trying to say? Chen Tian said in a low voice. That's a bit harsh, but the meaning isn't wrong. It's just that some people are a bit more extreme in this, and I'm a bit more gentle. That's why I'm trying to reason with you guys. Xue Jianfeng nodded indifferently. He glanced at everyone and said, I see that your group's aptitude is pretty good. It's quite rare to be able to cultivate to the great circle of the heaven realm in such a lousy place like the mortal world. How about this? All of you follow me back to the ancient alliance. That way, you can look out for each other. Miss Song, is that fine? Everyone paused. This guy really knew how to take advantage of the situation. Not only did he want to take Lingshan, but he also wanted to take them. Oh, and those unconscious beauties upstairs, you can bring them back to Archaic Alliance as well. I don't think you guys can cure them, but I have a way. But it has to be an Archaic Alliance. What do you think? Xue Jianfeng said. You can cure them? Lingshan and the others couldn't help but feel overjoyed. Meng Yao and the girls' conditions hadn't worsened in these 3 years, but they weren't getting any better either. Who knew what would happen if this went on? If there was a chance to cure them, it'd be great. Of course, what the secular world can't do doesn't mean that the Archaic Alliance can't. Xue Jianfeng pretended to be profound. Really? Then why don't you tell me why Meng Yao sis and the others are unconscious? Ziyu interrupted. Ugh, this. Xue Jianfeng was at a loss for words. He didn't know why Meng Yao and the other girls were unconscious at all. As for the Archaic Alliance being able to cure them, that was bullshit. The only reason he said that was to trick the girls back to the Archaic Alliance. Don't look at how all the girls were unconscious. Each and every one of them was devastatingly beautiful. When Xue Jianfeng entered just now, he took a glance at them and immediately drooled with desire. Thus, he couldn't help but have the thought of building a harem. If he brought all these beauties back, that scene would simply make him unable to stop even thinking about it. TCHC, I knew you were a liar. Ziyu crossed her arms and smiled coldly. Lingshan and the others reacted as well, glaring at Xue Jianfeng. They were too worried, and seeing his expression, they knew that he was up to no good. I, Xue Jianfeng, the #1 of the young generation in Archaic Alliance, didn't think that I'd be called a liar in the secular world. Haha, it seems like it's really hard to be a good person. I've been telling you guys so much, but it's useless. I guess I'll have to learn from the other sections. Xue Jianfeng's face changed. What do you want? Lingshan and the others said warily. What do I want? Needless to say, I'll take you away forcefully today. I'd like to see who dares to say no. Xue Jianfeng's embarrassment turned into rage, and his attitude changed as he reached out to grab Lingshan. Lingshan panicked at the sight, quickly retreating to dodge. Chen Tian and the others all charged forward, but their speed couldn't compare to Xue Jianfeng's full mastery. With just a bit of strength, Xue Jianfeng was already at Lingshan's side, grabbing her arm. I'll take you back to Archaic Alliance right now. Let's see who can stop me. Xue Jianfeng laughed loudly, but before he could finish laughing, the person he grabbed looked at him like he was a pervert. Oi oi, men shouldn't touch each other. Please behave yourself. What? Xue Jianfeng froze. The voice belonged to a man, and it turned out that he wasn't grabbing Lingshan at all. It was a man's arm, and this person wasn't even in the villa at all. Who are you? You want to steal my girlfriend, but you don't even know who I am? Is that appropriate? Linny smiled faintly. Linny. Lingshan and the others froze, rubbing their eyes and even pinching themselves to make sure they weren't dreaming, before rushing up to Linny. Never in their wildest dreams would they have thought that Lin Yi would come back at a time like this. Guys, I'm back. Leave the rest to me. Lin Yi turned around with a smile. He had a lot of things he wanted to say, but it was better to get rid of this fly first. He's a sky practitioner from Archaic Alliance. You have to be careful, boss. Everyone was excited and overjoyed, but they still remembered the threat that was Xue Jianfeng. Otherwise, they would have charged up and surrounded Lin Yi already. Don't worry, it'll be fine. Lin Yi smiled, not minding it. In fact, it was thanks to Fei Yongsheng that he was able to rush back in time this time. Originally, he would not have come back so quickly. On the way, he planned to use the spiritual sense energy of that piece of coke to restore his strength. However, after discovering that Fei Yongsheng had come to the villa through the spiritual sense imprint last time, he immediately knew that something was wrong. So he gave up on his plan to rush back as soon as possible. Chapter 50-70. That's right. Not only is he their boss, but he's also the dumb girl's boyfriend. Linny winked at Lingshan, and Lingshan looked at him with wide eyes. She was pleasantly surprised, but also filled with sweetness. Dumb girl. Xue Jianfeng paused and saw the sweet look on Lingshan's face as she looked at Lin Yi. He couldn't hold back his anger and smiled coldly. I don't care what kind of bullshit boyfriend you are, I'm taking Miss Song with me today. Anyone who tries to stop me will die. With that, Xue Jianfeng's body flashed once more as he pounced towards Lingshan, only to bump into Lin Yi, who had suddenly appeared in front of him. His face changed drastically as he staggered, barely managing to stop himself. Your archaic alliance isn't a gangster alliance, is it? Why are all of you like this, trying to steal the good stuff? Fuck the pretty girls. We're all civilized people, can't we have some morals? Linny said, speechless. You're calling me a gangster? Xue Jianfeng's face was green. That's right, and I don't have a good temper. My hands always itch when I see gangsters, so there's no helping it. I'll have to trouble you. Linny said as he took a step forward and slapped Jianfeng's face. Slap. The slap was crisp and clear, and Jianfeng couldn't help but be stunned. He touched the red palm print on his face in disbelief, his expression turning savage. You dare hit me? Didn't anyone teach you to hit people to death? You're so weak. You don't even know how to hit people. The common world is full of trash. Oh, you think I'm weak? This is the first time I've heard such a ridiculous request in my life. You're from the Archaic Alliance, after all, and I wanted to save you some face. Since that's the case, I won't hold back. Linny shrugged and slapped him again. Bang! Jianfeng fell down on the spot, his entire body sinking into the floor, unable to get up for a long time. Hee, it seems the Archaic Alliance isn't that great. They can't even take a beating. How can they be so thin-skinned? Linny smiled faintly. He hadn't been idling on the train for the past 2 days. With the help of the star-inked charcoal's majestic divine sense energy, his strength had already risen to the great circle of Foundation establishment. Dealing with Xue Jianfeng, who was also at the great circle of Foundation establishment, couldn't be any easier. Even though his current primordial spirit could not fight enemies of a higher level than his main body, it was still an invincible existence in front of experts of the same level as him. However, what made Lin Yi a little regretful was that he didn't know why his strength had stopped at the Foundation establishment great perfection. It was almost impossible for him to recover to the gold core stage. He didn't know what was missing. Fortunately, for now, the strength of the Foundation establishment great perfection was enough. Lingshan and the others cheered at the scene. They had absolute confidence in Lin Yi's strength, but Xue Jianfeng was no ordinary person. Even they didn't expect this Sky Dao practitioner to be so weak in front of Lin Yi. It took him a long time to get up, and he quickly took a few steps back when he saw Lin Yi in front of him. Just who are you? He's that primordial spirit practitioner. Sun Baimei and the others died in his hands. Fei Yongsheng, who'd been waiting outside, rushed in after hearing the commotion. Primordial spirit practitioner. It wasn't just Xue Jianfeng, but Lingshan and the others as well. How did Lin Yi become a primordial spirit practitioner all of a sudden? Fei Yongsheng, you really aren't afraid of death. I was merciful last time and let you off the hook. You dare come again? Lin Yi glanced at him. Fei Yongsheng almost pissed his pants. If it weren't for Xue Jianfeng, he'd probably be kneeling on the spot. Please don't misunderstand, Senior. I didn't want to come, it's Senior Brother Xue. What did you say? Xue Jianfeng was enraged when he heard that. He wanted nothing more than to cripple this spineless Fei Yongsheng. He pointed at Lin Yi and snorted coldly. I was just careless and underestimated my opponent. You can't possibly think that a mortal Yuan Shun like you can be my opponent, can you? Is that so? I also think that you're ridiculously weak, an embarrassment to the Archaic Alliance. Are you ready then? You're not careless, are you? Lin Yi looked at him with a smile that didn't seem like a smile. You're nothing but an ant when I get serious. I'm the number one of the Archaic Alliance's younger generation. You have no right to be cocky in front of me. Xue Jianfeng humphed coldly. All right, I'll take that as a sign that you're ready. Lin Yi's expression was strange as he smiled faintly. In the next instant, he suddenly appeared in front of Xue Jianfeng. raising his hand and giving him another slap. Xue Jianfeng was startled. With his strength, he didn't even see how Lin Yi got there. And by the time he reacted, Lin Yi's slap was already on his face. He didn't even have a chance to dodge before he fell to the ground again. You said you didn't use enough strength the first time, and you said you weren't ready the second time. What excuse do you have for the third time? Lin Yi looked at him, calm and unruffled. Ling Shan and the others couldn't help but burst out laughing at the scene. They'd all been pressured by Xue Jianfeng to the point where they couldn't even breathe. And now Lin Yi was back, and things turned out like this. How satisfying. It took Xue Jianfeng a long time to crawl up from the ground with great difficulty. The 3 consecutive slaps were all on the right side of his face. At this moment, the right side of his face was already very swollen. Even his mother wouldn't be able to recognize his pig face. You. Just who are you? Xue Jianfeng would be an idiot if he still didn't realize that he'd run into someone strong. The first 2 times he'd been able to use carelessness as a cover. But the third time was a different story. He had clearly dodged with all his strength, but an indescribably powerful and mysterious true qi suddenly pressed him to the ground. And even the true qi in his body was forcibly suppressed to the point of disorder. The key point was, he could vaguely hear a low and deep dragon roar. This result left him horrified. His opponent seemed to have the aura of a peak foundation establishment cultivator, while he was clearly the strongest peak foundation establishment cultivator in the Archaic Alliance. But in front of this person, he didn't have the slightest ability to fight back. Just where did this person come from? He couldn't possibly be from the mortal world, could he? Chapter 5071. Don't go too far. Xue Jianfeng held his right cheek, raging. His left cheek, which was the only part that wasn't damaged, was now green and red. He saw that Lin Yi was about to slap him again, and he quickly retreated 10 meters away. Luckily, the living room was big enough, or he wouldn't be able to escape. Go too far? You're the one who's going to steal my girlfriend, and you still have the face to say that? Lin Yi was amused at the look on his face. He crooked his finger. Come here, I promise I won't kill you. Humph. We don't know who's going to kill who yet. Snow sword unsheath. Xue Jianfeng roared. And a soft sword that was wrapped around his waist was unsheathed, piercing towards Lin Yi at a speed that was hard to see with the naked eye. The surrounding temperature dropped drastically, and everyone had goosebumps all over their bodies. Xue Jianfeng wasn't just for show after all. His title as the strongest foundation perfection practitioner in the Archaic Alliance wasn't just for show. Other than the difference in strength, he was also trying to numb Lin Yi's senses. Now that his qi was flowing smoothly again, he revealed his true strength. Ling Shan and the others were all shocked at the scene. This guy could actually control a sword from afar. This was a legendary skill. They all broke out in cold sweat for Lin Yi. Lin Yi, on the other hand, didn't feel anything at all. As long as the qi release was strong enough, controlling a sword from afar wasn't difficult at all. The sword technique was the deciding factor. Xue Jianfeng was just a foundation perfection practitioner, and to Ling Shan and the others, he was nothing in Lin Yi's eyes. He'd seen Lu Ziyu's sword skills with his own eyes, and compared to him, this Xue Jianfeng wasn't even worth looking at. He wasn't even worthy of his attention. However, for some reason, Xue Jianfeng's sword technique gave him a feeling of déjà vu, as if he had seen it somewhere before. However, he couldn't think of a reason, and could only shake his head. The flexible sword pierced straight towards Lin Yi's face. If it was Lin Yi's original body, even if he let it stab freely, Xue Jianfeng's sword probably wouldn't be able to break through his Jinqi defense. However, Lin Yi was only a primordial spirit of Foundation Establishment Great Circle. Even if he had the upper hand in terms of strength, he didn't dare to be so careless. Lin Yi's figure flashed and reappeared. In an instant, he had easily thrown the flexible sword behind him. Then he did not stop and directly pounced towards Xue Jianfeng, who was in the opposite corner of the wall. He raised his hand, as if he was going to give him another slap. Wait, aren't you afraid that I'll kill them? Xue Jianfeng smiled viciously. He was still in the air, and while it was difficult to kill Lin Yi, if he were to change his target to Ling Shan and the others, he'd definitely be able to kill them all. Ling Shan and the others' faces changed when they heard that. With their strength, there was indeed no way they could dodge. All of them started cursing the guy for being shameless. "Humph, you guys forced me to do this, refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit." Xue Jianfeng laughed coldly as he pointed at Lin Yi. "If you really think there's something, you'd better kneel down and apologize. Who knows, I might let them go. Otherwise, humph." He didn't expect that Lin Yi wouldn't care at all, slapping him in the face without hesitation, not forgetting to mock him. It's not wrong to have a low IQ, but if you have to come out and embarrass yourself, then that's your fault. This guy was a madman. Xue Jianfeng jumped in fright at the scene. He thought that Lin Yi wouldn't just let these women and lackeys be slaughtered. Even if it was just an act to win their hearts, he'd at least be able to find a chance. Who would have thought that Lin Yi didn't care about these people's lives at all? Fine, since you're forcing me to die, then I'll let all of them die with me. Xue Jianfeng gritted his teeth and swore. He tried his best to dodge Lin Yi's slaps, while controlling his flexible sword to start a massacre. But in the next moment he suddenly froze. Where was his flexible sword? Bam! Without any suspense, Xue Jianfeng fell to the ground with another slap from Lin Yi. This guy was still searching for his soft sword with all his might, and finally found a pile of scattered metal shards on the ground. His mind went blank as he mumbled in disbelief. How did this happen? He'd been manipulating the sword from a distance, and the speed of the sword was so fast that it made one's hair stand on end. Lin Yi had only dodged the first slash, and then came straight at him. How did the sword break like this? Hard to understand. Such a normal sword technique, and you're playing with it from afar? I can just use a wave of killing intent to take care of it. This isn't your trump card, is it? Lin Yi curled his lips as he looked at Xue Jianfeng's soulless face. Xue Jianfeng spat out a mouthful of blood, furious and shocked. He'd suffered too much today. Why do I suddenly feel like this guy's a bit pitiful? Ziyu's lips curled up. He's kicked a metal board, acting all high and mighty in front of boss Lin Yi. Doesn't he know how to look at himself in a puddle of piss? Does he really think he can act all high and mighty in Archaic Alliance? That's like he hasn't seen the world. Serves him right, Shintian grinned. The others all laughed as well. It was indeed frightening, but Lin Yi dealt with it so effortlessly. Such a miraculous move made them all excited. Lin Yi smiled as well. It had been 3 years, and they hadn't changed at all. He couldn't help but feel emotional as he thought of the girls on the second floor. 3 years had passed, and he still hadn't found a way to cure them. His strength had increased a lot, but he still hadn't seen Zhang Liju. How much longer could they wait for him? While everyone was talking and laughing, Xue Jianfeng, who was on the ground, suddenly moved. However, this time, he did not think of a desperate counterattack. That was simply wishful thinking. At this moment, he only had one thought, and that was to escape from this villa. He was giving it his all to run for his life. He shot out like a cannonball towards the nearest window. Ling Shan and the others gasped. If Xue Jianfeng were to make it back and add fuel to the fire in front of the Archaic Alliance, it had become a world war between the Archaic Alliance and the common world sects. Chapter 50-72. Since you're so dishonest, I'll have to be a bit more ruthless to keep you in line. Lin Yi smiled coldly as he stomped down on Xue Jianfeng, who screamed in pain. His entire body was in shock. Lin Yi's stomp didn't just cause him pain, it crushed his dantian. Even the strongest practitioner would be a cripple if their dantian was destroyed. Xue Jianfeng's life would be over if he didn't have some sort of miracle in the future. The cries of pain didn't stop, and even the security guards were alerted. Lin Yi picked up a piece of cloth and stuffed it into Xue Jianfeng's mouth, and only then did Xue Jianfeng calm down. He lay on the ground in despair, not moving an inch. There was no longer any of the confidence and arrogance he had before. Even his eyes were filled with despair. Dumb girl. Get someone to bring him back to the secret investigation department and lock him up. Use whatever methods you need, and get as much information as you can about the Archaic Alliance. See what they're up to. There's no need to go easy on scum like him. Lin Yi turned to Ling Shan. Ling Shan was just staring blankly at Lin Yi, only coming back to herself when everyone's weird gazes landed on her. She quickly used the excuse of making a phone call to hide. You're a vice director now, but you're still so dumb after 3 years. Linny smiled, speechless. His eyes landed on Fei Yongsheng. Fei Yongsheng was scared out of his wits. Yin Jiping and Sun Baimei had been killed by Lin Yi, and now it was Xue Jianfeng, who was even stronger than him. Lin Yi's strength was already deeply ingrained in his mind, and he couldn't bring himself to resist at all with his foundation intermediate stage strength. Mercy, Senior. I really had nothing to do with this. I was only forced to be his driver. I didn't do anything. Senior, please don't cripple me. I surrender. Fei Yongsheng's kneeling posture was still perfect. His heart, on the other hand, was terrified. After all, Lin Yi had let him go last time, and now he was in Lin Yi's hands again. Even if he didn't do anything to Lingshan and the others, who knew what Lin Yi was thinking? In fact, Lin Yi didn't intend to start a massacre. Seeing that the man was so sensible, he nodded and said, "All right, you can stay with me. We'll have to deal with people from the Archaic Alliance in the future. I just happen to be lacking an internal guide." Yes. Thank you for your mercy. Fei Yongsheng was overjoyed. As long as he could keep his life and his dantian, everything else was negotiable. Being Lin Yi's follower and guide was a little like defecting to the enemy, but the Archaic Alliance didn't have much higher standards for morality compared to the common world, especially when it came to something like his life and dantian. There was no need to make a choice. Xue Jianfeng was crippled, and Fei Yongsheng surrendering. This sudden storm had finally come to an end. Lingshan and the others finally had the chance to surround Lin Yi. Looking at these familiar faces, Lin Yi couldn't help but feel a surge of warmth in his heart. Starting from Lingshan, everyone gave him a bear hug, regardless of gender. To him, everyone here was his family. These 3 years, it's been hard on everyone. Lin Yi said emotionally, "Boss, what are you talking about? This is what we should be doing. There's nothing hard about it." Chintian said, "Yeah, boss, you're still treating us like outsiders? You're breaking our hearts." Yu Bing, Qikuan, and the others joined in. Fine. I said the wrong thing, alright? Who asked you guys to be on the same boat as me? You deserve to die from exhaustion, alright? Lin Yi raised his hands in surrender. That's more like it. Chintian and the others smiled. Lin Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry when Ziyu suddenly came over and sniffed Lin Yi from head to toe. She frowned. "Lin Yi bro, what's that smell on you? You're not looking for women again, are you?" "Huh?" Lin Yi paused. Seeing Lingshan and the others trying to stifle their laughter, he realized that he was a Yuan Shen. How could he smell like that? He was almost tricked by this girl. The reunion didn't last long, however, because Lingshan suddenly remembered the news she just received. She quickly told Lin Yi about what happened in Snowy Valley, and how Mrs. Tang was injured. "How dare you?" Lin Yi was in a good mood, but he was furious after hearing this. "Time is of the essence. I'm going to Snowy Valley right now. You guys wait here for me." "All right." Everyone nodded. After seeing the fight between Lin Yi and Xue Jianfeng, they knew that they weren't strong enough to help. Lin Yi, on the other hand, would be able to do what he could if he went himself. Lin Yi was about to leave when he thought about it, and went to the second floor to check on the unconscious girls. He felt their pulses one by one, and breathed a sigh of relief when he realized that there were no changes. In a situation like this, the fact that there were no changes was good news. His main body was already a mystic ascension early phase, and once he became a magnate, Lin Yi believed that his chances of finding Zhang Liju would be much higher. Zhang Liju might be mysterious, but if they were at the same level, then their activity areas would overlap. Naturally, they would run into each other. He believed that as long as he could find Zhang Liju, the girls would be saved. Coming out of the villa, Lin Yi had Fei Yongsheng with him. He was still the driver, but he was driving for Xue Jianfeng, and now the boss was Lin Yi. What surprised Lin Yi was the fact that Fei Yongsheng's driving skills weren't bad at all. He didn't care about the traffic rules at all, but his speed was really fast. It was supposed to be a private car, but Fei Yongsheng was able to turn it into a super sports car, like he was on steroids. Lin Yi was speechless at the thought. But his driving style was to Lin Yi's liking. Lin Yi wanted to get to Snowy Valley as soon as possible. If this guy drove like a snail, he'd have to do it himself. This saved him a lot of energy. What's your relationship with that Xue Jianfeng? Linny asked from the front passenger seat. Senior. He's the big disciple of our sect. And he's the one leading the training in the common world. I don't dare disobey him, and that's why this happened. Fei Yongxing replied carefully. Chapter 5073. Snow Sword School. Fei Yongxing answered. What's that? Snow Sword School? Which snow and which sword? Linny was shocked when he heard that. Snow as in snow, sword as in saber. Fei Yongxing gave Linny a strange look. He had just told him the name of his school. Was there a need to be so excited? Linny was immediately stunned. Not only did it sound like the same name, even the words were exactly the same. There really was no such thing as a coincidence. If he did not know that the primordial underworld and Heaven Stage Island were two different things, he would have thought that this was Heaven Stage Island's Snow Sword School. Heaven Stage Island and the primordial underworld had nothing to do with each other. They were two completely isolated planes. This kind of thing was impossible. Although he felt that it should be a pure coincidence, Linny faintly felt that something was wrong, because he suddenly thought of Xue Jianfeng's move. It seemed to be a bit similar to Heaven Stage Island's Snow Sword School. He did not know whether it was an illusion or the truth. After all, Linny had only seen a few moves of Snow Sword School from Wei Xinjin. At most, he had a general feeling, but he could not be sure. By the way, do you know which school Lung Lung is from? Linny asked. She is also from our Snow Sword School. Fei Yongxing could not help but feel a bit embarrassed. Because he had bad intentions towards Lung Lung last time. Whenever Linny mentioned the name, he would be terrified. He was afraid that Linny would react and settle the score. So last time his answer was very vague. As a result, Linny did not hear that they were from the same school. Lung Lung is also from your Snow Sword School? Linny was immediately interested. He continued to ask, then tell me about your Snow Sword School. Yes, but I am just an ordinary disciple in the school. I actually do not know much. At most, I only know some things that everyone knows, Fei Yongxing said weakly. Tell me everything you know, Linny said lightly. Yes, our Snow Sword School is a first-rate school in the Archaic Alliance. Our disciples are generally stronger than other schools. In other schools, many foundation establishment disciples are core disciples. But in our Snow Sword School, they're only the first step to becoming a formal disciple. Only people like Senior Brother Xue, who are at the peak of foundation establishment, or people like Lung Lung, who are extremely talented, can become a core disciple of the school, Fei Yongxing said honestly, not daring to hide anything. Linny thought for a while. Only masters in the foundation establishment realm could become official disciples. From this point of view, it was not much different from the Heaven Stage Island. After all, the official disciples of the three pavilions in the North Island were also in the foundation establishment realm. If the disciple's strength surpasses the peak of foundation establishment realm and reaches the Golden Core realm, then they will automatically be promoted to Martial Uncle. In our Snow Sword School, seniority is based on strength. Although the real master is still called master in private, on the surface, if the disciple also reaches the Golden Core realm, then they will have to call each other senior brother, Fei Yongxing continued. This showed the difference between the archaic Jianghu and Heaven Stage Island. Golden Core realm masters were only inner sect disciples on Heaven Stage Island. If one wanted to become a martial uncle, they had to be at least at the nascent soul realm. Above the Golden Core realm, I heard that our Snow Sword School has nascent soul realm old monsters, but I have never seen them in person. As for the higher levels, I don't know. Fei Yongxing looked at Linny with eager eyes. This was all he knew. If Linny wanted to ask more, he really could not do anything. Seeing this, Lin Yi's face immediately darkened. Watch the road when driving. What if you hit someone? Can you afford to pay for it? I can't afford to pay for it. Fei Yongxing immediately burst into tears. Last time, when they passed by a village entrance, an old lady fell down dozens of meters away. She insisted that he hit her, and would not let her go unless he paid for it. She even called a group of people from the village. He was a middle-stage foundation establishment realm master, but he was scared by a group of ordinary people. Thinking about it made him sad. They traveled as fast as lightning. When Lin Yi and Fei Yongxing arrived at the Snow Valley, everyone in the Snow Valley was in a panic. The slightly stronger Heaven Realm disciples were almost all injured. On the contrary, the weaker disciples mostly escaped because they were not taken seriously. At this time, almost all the Snow Valley disciples were gathered in the small square. They all looked at the four people in front of them, as if they were facing a great enemy. A feeling of despair and fear spread among them. It was no wonder that they were so helpless. Any one of these four people could beat all their strongest disciples. There was no way they could fight them. Have you all made up your mind? I've said it before. Delaying any longer won't do you any good. As long as the disciples I've pointed out obediently follow me, nothing else will happen. It's obviously a win-win situation for everyone. So why bother asking for trouble? The leader of the group said arrogantly. Everyone in the Snow Valley was silent. The new Snow Valley had coughed out a mouthful of black blood. These Archaic Alliance bastards were not here to recruit disciples. They were clearly here to dig up the foundation of the sect. The disciples he called out were all talented, and the sect's hope. If they were all taken away by him, the Snow Valley would be destroyed. They would never be able to rise again. Wishful thinking. These disciples have been painstakingly raised by the Snow Valley. This is their home. They are people of the Snow Valley when they live, and ghosts of the Snow Valley when they die. A Snow Valley elder struggled to stand up and scolded. Noisy. The leader of the group cursed coldly. He casually waved his hand, and the elder was sent flying, leaving behind a dazzling trail of blood. This scene once again caused the people of the Snow Valley to tremble with fear. From top to bottom, even the most powerful Grand Elder had been severely injured. How could they fight against the other party? Eldest senior brother, in my opinion, let's not talk nonsense with them. Just drag these disciples away. Once they enter the ancient Jianghu, they will naturally know what is good and what is bad. Why waste time with them here? A bearded man next to him suggested. Fine. Originally, I wanted to end this peacefully and not give people anything to talk about. But since they are so untactful, there is no other way. The leader nodded. As soon as he said this, the other two followers immediately shouted and attacked. The people of the Snow Valley turned pale with fright. At this time, they had no power to resist. They couldn't even escape. There was only despair. Chapter 50-74. Who is it? The leader and the bearded man beside him jumped in fright. Someone who could send 2 mid-stage Foundation establishment cultivators flying without making a sound? How could there be someone like that in Snowy Valley? You people from the Archaic Alliance really don't care about what you do. I thought Xue Jianfeng was shameless enough, but you guys are even more shameless than him, coming out in broad daylight to kidnap people. Don't you know that's against the law? You'll be executed by firing squad for 5 minutes? Lin Yi looked at the two unkindly. What firing squad for 5 minutes? The leader paused and looked closely at Lin Yi and Lin Yi. He obviously didn't recognize Lin Yi, but he did recognize Fei Yongxing, who was behind Lin Yi. Aren't you from the Snow Sword School? Is this guy from the Snow Sword School too? Why haven't I seen him before? To be able to casually kill 2 middle-stage Foundation establishment experts with a single move. His strength was at least in the late stage of Foundation establishment. Even in the Snow Sword faction, he would be able to obtain a position as a core disciple. The immemorial martial world was only so big, and the core disciples of the various sects would almost always see each other. Under normal circumstances, he should have at least met them a few times. Lin Yi didn't even look at him as he headed straight for Mrs. Tang, who was in the crowd. Mrs. Tang's injuries weren't that serious, just that she'd been hit by the shockwave. She'd been moaning and groaning when she saw Lin Yi. She jumped up with a whoosh, overjoyed. Yi, why are you back? When did you get back? Auntie, I just came back. I'm sorry I didn't take good care of you, Lin Yi said guiltily. Mrs. Tang was a snobbish person, but she'd always treated him well. She'd try her best to get anything for him. Now that Tang Yin was unconscious, Lin Yi had to take good care of them. Snowy Valley was supposed to be a peaceful paradise, but now something like this had happened. The Archaic Alliance's image in Lin Yi's eyes had dropped to the freezing point. It's fine. It's good that you're back. How's Ian? Mrs. Tang asked. It's still the same for now, but I'm sure I can find a way to cure her. Lin Yi's expression darkened, and he said, Auntie, please sit down first, I'll heal you. Ah, it's fine. I'll be fine after a few days. Lil Yi, you should think of a way to get rid of these people. Mrs. Tang's face was still twitching from the pain, but now that they were facing a formidable enemy, she could still distinguish the severity of the situation. She knew that Lin Yi was the only savior of the Snow Valley, and she did not want to distract him. Auntie, you don't have to worry. It won't be long. Besides, I don't care about cats and dogs that don't know the rules. As Lin Yi spoke, he began to heal Mrs. Tang. The people of Snowy Valley heard this, and although they felt some hope in their hearts, most of them still thought that he was deliberately mystifying things. As far as they were concerned, Lin Yi was strong, but these were all heavenly Tao cultivators. Could Lin Yi be stronger than them? The two from the Archaic Alliance exploded in anger when they heard this. The leader gave Big Beard a look, telling him to go check on the two mid-stage Foundation establishment disciples. The result shocked him. Both of them were heavily injured, and they were on their last breaths. Beating two mid-stage Foundation establishment disciples to the brink of death in one move was far more difficult than directly killing them. This was clearly because the opponent had deliberately controlled the damage. Such strength was truly shocking. I am Qingquan Sec's eldest senior brother, Yu Zhengliang. What sect are you from? Why don't you report your name? The leader shouted. Lin Yi still did not look at him, and continued to heal Mrs. Tang. Fei Yongxing saw this and could only bite the bullet and say, the disciples here are suitable to cultivate our Snow Sword School's mental cultivation method. But your Qingquan sect is one step ahead of us, and forcefully snatched them away. Isn't that against the rules? Humph. There is someone here who matches our Cosmos Gate's aptitude. You, a mere ordinary disciple of the Snow Sword faction, dares to step forward and say such words to me? Do you think you are Shui Jianfeng? You actually dare to snatch someone from me? Yu Zhengliang said contemptuously. Fei Yongxing immediately choked, and snuck a glance at Lin Yi. This person was much more ruthless than Shui Jianfeng. Even Shui Jianfeng, the number one of the Archaic Alliance's younger generation, had been beaten half to death by him, and even his Dantian had been crushed. In front of such a ruthless person, how could Yu Zhengliang be any better than Shui Jianfeng? However, he could only think this in his heart. He didn't dare say it out loud. Seeing that Lin Yi was still indifferently healing Mrs. Tang, Fei Yongxing could only bite the bullet and say, You've misunderstood. Our Snow Sword School has no intention of snatching people away. Whether or not they want to join our sect is entirely up to them. We definitely won't force them. After all, Shui Jianfeng did the same thing as Yu Zhengliang. It was just that his method was milder. However, what Fei Yongxing said was the absolute truth. Even Shui Jianfeng, who led the team out to train, had become a cripple. If the Snow Sword faction wanted to recruit more people, they would not dare to force their way in. The Snow Sword School has always been hypocritical, but everyone knows what kind of shady business you've been doing in private. You don't have to pretend to be a good person in front of me, do you? Even if Shui Jianfeng was here, I, Yu Zhengliang, will definitely take in all of these disciples from Shui Valley. Yu Zhengliang said and suddenly released a powerful aura. It was another Foundation establishment Great Circle expert. The faces of the people of the Snow Valley all changed. Before, it was only the two mid-stage Foundation establishment experts who attacked. Now Yu Zhengliang's strength seemed to be many times stronger. How could they live? Could Lin Yi withstand it? Fei Yongxing saw this, and quietly took 2 steps back. It was fine for him to say some polite words to buy time, but if he really had to fight with someone like Yu Zhengliang, he wouldn't even dare to die. With his strength, he wouldn't be able to withstand even one move. When my Qingquan sect does things, those who stand in our way will die, Yu Zhengliang said ruthlessly. At the same time, he gave a look to the bearded man next to him. The bearded man immediately rushed toward the people of the Snow Valley. His aura was only slightly weaker than Yu Zhengliang's. He was actually a peak late-stage Foundation establishment expert. The people of the Snow Valley were shocked, but soon they realized that they were thinking too much. The bearded man wasn't coming for them. From the beginning to the end, the bearded man only had one target, and that was Lin Yi. Chapter 50-75. He go to hell. Big Beardy's mouth curved into a sinister smile as he swung his hand towards the back of Lin Yi's head. Once it hit, Lin Yi's head would immediately be split open. However, before he could finish his attack, Lin Yi continued to heal Mrs. Tang's injuries and sent out a wave of murderous aura without even turning his head. Big Beardy was sent flying with a howl, just like the other two mid-stage foundational cultivators. He landed heavily on the ground tens of meters away and couldn't get up again. The crowd was dead silent as they looked at Lin Yi without a shred of doubt in their eyes. This guy wasn't just bragging, he really did have the ability to look down on these Sky Dao cultivators. Yu Zhengliang's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He thought that Lin Yi had the advantage of sneak attacks, which was why he could easily deal with the two mid-stage foundational cultivators. He didn't think that even Big Beardy wouldn't be able to take a single hit from him. One had to know that Big Beardy was only slightly weaker than him. Only Fei Yongxing was prepared for this. After all, even Xue Jianfeng ended up like that, not to mention these guys from Qingkuan sect. He was a little sad when he saw Xue Jianfeng getting beaten up, but now that it was someone from Qingkuan sect, Fei Yongxing felt a strange sense of satisfaction. These arrogant guys deserved to be beaten up. Alright, Auntie, move around a bit. Lin Yi carefully examined Mrs. Tang's injuries, and only stood up when they didn't affect her anymore. He signaled Mrs. Tang to walk 2 steps. Mrs. Tang performed a square dance in front of everyone, and it was only after the song was over that she exclaimed in surprise, "It's really all healed. There's no injury at all, and it doesn't hurt at all. You're amazing. It's good that it doesn't hurt anymore. Auntie, rest here for a bit. I'll help you vent your anger." Lin Yi smiled and walked towards Yu Zhengliang. "What do you want?" Yu Zhengliang couldn't help but reveal a bit of nervousness. Seeing what happened to Big Beard, even a fool would know that Lin Yi was definitely not someone to be trifled with. Although he was the proud and arrogant Qingkuan sect's eldest senior brother, a dignified foundation establishment realm master, he really didn't have much confidence in facing Lin Yi. It was a pity that he was now riding a tiger, and it was hard for him to get off. He had aggressively brought people to the Snow Valley to snatch the disciple. But not only did he fail to snatch the disciple, his subordinates were all killed. Looking at the situation, even he himself was in a difficult position. At this time, he could neither advance nor retreat. As the senior disciple of the Qingkuan sect, he could not possibly abandon his junior disciple and run away, right? Nothing much, it's just blood for blood, a tooth for a tooth. Whatever you guys did to the people of the Snow Valley, you'll have to pay back double. You're from the Archaic Alliance after all. You should at least have this basic understanding, right? Lin Yi laughed coldly as he cracked his knuckles. Hearing this voice, Yu Zhengliang was frightened and took 2 steps back. He put on a brave front and said, "Who the hell are you? You're too courteous. I'm not a saint, I'm just a commoner. I can't compare to your Archaic Alliance. Your Archaic Alliance is so powerful that you can snatch whoever you want. This kind of thing can't be done in the secular world. Human traffickers are guilty of the most heinous crimes. If you catch them, you'll be shot for 5 minutes." Lin Yi said in a mocking tone. Even if Yu Zhengliang did not understand, he could tell that it was definitely not a good thing. His originally arrogant face suddenly turned purple with anger. Killing intent surged from his body as he said with a fierce expression, "Boy, even if you're not weak, you're only at the peak of the foundation establishment stage. Do you think you can challenge the Archaic Alliance? If you know what's good for you, bow your head and admit your mistake, then today's matter will end here. I can let these Snow Valley disciples go, but if you continue to pester me, then wait for the Archaic Alliance to exterminate your sect." Lin Yi was stunned for a moment. He looked him up and down and said, "If I'm not wrong, you seem to be begging for mercy?" Yu Zhengliang was speechless. Asking to stop here and promising to let the Snow Valley disciples go was indeed begging for mercy. After all, Lin Yi's performance just now was too shocking. If he really fought with Lin Yi one-on-one, he might not have much chance of winning. In this kind of situation, taking the initiative to retreat was the wisest choice. However, all masters wanted face. He thought that this was at most a negotiation. He was the Qinquan sect's eldest senior disciple. How could he beg for mercy from a commoner? It's the first time I've seen someone pleading with such a fresh and elegant demeanor. Let me give you a friendly reminder. At least act more professional next time you beg for mercy. That tone of yours is very easy to misunderstand as bickering, and you'll get yourself a beating. Linny said as he glanced at Fei Yangsheng. When it came to begging for mercy, this guy was the real model. He knelt when he said he would, without any hesitation. Yu Zhengliang's face alternated between green and white. It took him a long time to recover. He thought that although this guy's mouth was harsh, at least he was tactful and didn't dare to challenge the entire archaic alliance. He snorted coldly and said, "The mountains will never change, the rivers will always flow." "Wait," Linny immediately interrupted him, and curled his lips. "Don't talk to me like we'll meet again someday. Did I say that you could leave? You're not even begging sincerely. Do you think I'll spoil you? Do you think I'm your father? You've gone too far." Yu Zhengliang was furious. He had never suffered such humiliation in the archaic alliance. He no longer cared about the comparison of strength, and madly rushed over. In the blink of an eye, Yu Zhengliang was already in front of Lin Yi. Each of his palms was surrounded by a powerful true qi. The two true qi were completely different in nature. One was sharp like a blade, while the other was heavy like a mountain. The former focused on attack, while the latter focused on defense. It was the Qinquan sect's signature heaven and earth palm. Your palm technique is not bad, but it's a pity that you're a bit lacking. Lin Yi smiled faintly as he tilted his body and dodged Yu Zhengliang's first palm. If it were anyone else, they would have been exposed a long time ago. Yu Zhengliang, however, was able to use his other palm to block the attack. He was, after all, the big brother of Qinquan sect, and he had the strength to back it up. With this heaven and earth palm, Yu Zhengliang's strength was definitely at the top of the great circle of foundation establishment experts. Even Xue Jianfeng, who was known as the strongest great circle of foundation establishment in the Archaic Alliance, would only have a 50-50 chance of winning against him. At most, his chances of winning were slightly higher. Chapter 5076. After dodging his opponent's first palm strike, Lin Yi casually pointed a finger at Yu Zhengliang's face. Yu Zhengliang hurriedly raised his palm to defend. Lin Yi's finger seemed ordinary and without any momentum, but the more it was so, the more he was shocked. If Lin Yi's momentum was shocking, then it would have been fine. But now he could not understand it at all. In the end, Lin Yi's finger was really just a casual finger, without any power to speak of. Yu Zhengliang barely had to use any true energy to defend himself. Was this guy just bluffing? Yu Zhengliang suddenly felt humiliated, as if he had been played like a monkey. He could not help but counterattack with all his strength. But in the end, he relaxed a little, and in the exchange of attack and defense, he only revealed a slight flaw. Lin Yi's fingertip immediately drew a blue arc. The arc instantly pierced through the true energy protecting Yu Zhengliang's body. He felt numb all over, and by the time he reacted, Lin Yi had already swept his face with 1,000 fiery legs. He was kicked 100 meters away, and fell to the ground vomiting blood. The blue arc and the 1,000 fiery legs. The power of Lin Yi's moves was actually not much stronger than the heaven and earth palm. The reason why the battle was so one-sided was purely because of the difference in intelligence. Yu Zhengliang, the eldest senior disciple of the Qinquan sect, seemed experienced, but against an existence whose body was comparable to a giant of the mountain opening stage, he was really too inexperienced. Everyone from the Snow Valley was shocked to see this scene. The Qinquan sect had 4 heavenly Dao stage experts, but none of them could survive a full exchange with Lin Yi. Just how strong was this Lin Yi? What archaic alliance, you ignorant little bastards. You have the guts to provoke the Snow Valley. Now you know the consequences. Mrs. Tang saw this, and immediately became lively. She pointed at the heavily injured Yu Zhengliang, and the others, and took the opportunity to scold them. Her scolding skills left Lin Yi in the dust. In the end, she did not forget to say proudly, "I have already told you that my son-in-law is very powerful. He can kill you little ruffians with one kick. Look, you are finished." Everyone looked at each other. When did this woman say that? She didn't even know that Lin Yi could come back to save the day. If he really said that, wouldn't he be asking for a beating? However, no one really cared about such things at this time. Everyone knew that Mrs. Tang was this kind of person, and she was the closest person to Lin Yi. The reason why Lin Yi rushed over to help was mostly because of her. Otherwise, the storm today would have ended tragically. Valley Master Shui, what do you plan to do with these four? Lin Yi asked the new Valley Lord. The people of the Snow Valley were instantly energized. The tables had truly turned. Just a moment ago, Yu Zhengliang and the others had been riding roughshod over them. Who would have thought that the situation would be reversed so quickly? Seeing the four of them in such a pathetic state, it was truly a relief. We will follow President Lin's decision, the new Valley Lord said hurriedly. This time, more than half of the Snow Valley disciples were injured. Everyone hated Yu Zhengliang and the others to the core, but she did not dare to deal with them casually. After all, they were from the Archaic Alliance. The Snow Valley would still not have peace. All right, then tell them to scram. I will take care of the Archaic Alliance. Lin Yi gave Fei Yangxing a look. This guy was born to be a lackey. He immediately went up and kicked the four half-dead people off the ground. Although Yu Zhengliang and the others were too injured to move, they gritted their teeth and crawled out of the Snow Valley. They were afraid that Lin Yi would go back on his word and kill them to silence them. But these people were clearly thinking too much. Lin Yi had no plans to completely fall out with the Archaic Alliance. After all, his Yuan Shen could not stay in the mortal world forever. And right now, he only had the strength of a Foundation establishment cultivator. It was not enough to crush the entire Archaic Alliance. So unless he had no other choice, he would not easily start a massacre. Lin Yi's decision was a little unexpected. But looking at Yu Zhengliang and the other three's pitiful faces, the people of the Snow Valley were relieved. Other than regretting that they couldn't take revenge with their own hands, they didn't really have anything to complain about. Many thanks to President Lin for helping us out this time. On behalf of all the disciples of the Snow Valley, I cannot thank you enough. President Lin's great kindness will always be remembered, the new Valley Lord said solemnly. You are too kind. The Snow Valley and I have a deep relationship. This is all part of my duty. There is no need to thank me. Lin Yi waved his hand with a smile. Suddenly, he remembered Sydney's instructions and asked, "Oh right, how has the Snow Valley been these past few years?" Everything has been fine for the past few years, except for today's storm. The new Valley Lord smiled bitterly, then looked up and down at Lin Yi. With some surprise he asked, "President Lin, you've returned. Has everyone else returned as well?" "That's not it. My situation is a little special. This time, I'm the only one who returned." Lin Yi shook his head. Seeing the Valley Lord's hesitant expression, he laughed. "You want to ask about Sydney's situation, right? She's doing very well. When I returned this time, she asked me to bring a message for you all to rest assured." "Oh, that's good, that's good." Hearing this, everyone in the Snow Valley heaved a sigh of relief, and a smile appeared on their faces. The former Valley Lord Sydney was very popular here. "President Lin, let's go into the house and have a seat. I'll get someone to prepare a banquet. Although you and the Snow Valley have a deep relationship, you've helped us out this time. We should at least show our appreciation," the new Valley Master of the Snow Valley suggested. "Yeah, it's rare for you to come back. Why don't you stay here for a few more days?" Mrs. Tang chimed in. She had gotten a lot of treasures from the Snow Valley in the past few years, and she was planning to give them to Lin Yi in secret. "Auntie, I really can't stay here this time. I have to go back to East Ocean City as soon as possible. The Archaic Alliance can't be delayed," Lin Yi said. "I see." Mrs. Tang didn't know what to say. If it was something else, she would have held on to Lin Yi without a second thought. However, the Archaic Alliance was not a small matter. Especially after today's dangerous experience, even she knew that if she didn't handle this well, it would be a big problem. Everything else could be delayed, but this matter couldn't be delayed. Everyone in the Snow Valley had the same thought, and they immediately said, "If that's the case, then we will wait for President Lin's arrival when we have time." Chapter 5077. Fei Yangxing was still driving like a madman. First it was Shui Jianfeng. And now it was Yu Zhengliang and the others. The guy's attitude towards Lin Yi was getting more and more respectful. The strong ruled after all. And that was the rule no matter where they went. If I let Yu Zhengliang and the other three go back, what do you think the Archaic Alliance will do? Lin Yi suddenly asked. Ugh. Fei Yongxing choked. At this moment, he felt ashamed of being a traitor. But he quickly threw it to the back of his head and said weakly. It should be very nervous. First, Sun Baimei and Yin Jiping from the evil warding sect were killed. Then, Xue Jianfeng from the Snowsword faction had his Dantian crippled and was imprisoned in the Mystery Investigation Bureau. Now, Yu Zhengliang and the others from the Qingquan sect were tortured. Any one of these incidents would cause a huge commotion. Now that all of these incidents were stacked together, the entire Great Ancient Alliance was in a state of panic. And the cause of all this was Lin Yi. Everyone thought that the training in the secular world would be easy and pleasant. But with Lin Yi's interference, the Archaic Alliance wouldn't be happy anymore. What will happen after the nervousness? Will there be any follow-up actions? Like sending people to take revenge? Lin Yi continued to ask. This was the question he was most concerned about. If the Archaic Alliance were to lose control of themselves after this series of provocations, they'd start massacring the mortal world. That would be troublesome. They won't directly send people to take revenge. After all, the Archaic Alliance is just a loose alliance. As long as it's not their own sect that's in trouble, they'll just laugh at the other sections. I don't think they'll be so kind as to stand up for other sections. I think they'll at most inform the disciples to be careful. Fei Yongxing carefully guessed. Although this answer was a little suspicious, it was the most likely situation. After all, the Archaic Alliance wasn't a monolithic one. There would always be new and old grudges between sections. Unless there was a disaster, they wouldn't easily work together. Lin Yi let out a sigh of relief and asked, Do you have a way to contact the disciples who are out for training? Do you know how to contact Lung Lung? Lung Lung's whereabouts was another important matter in Lin Yi's heart. Although she had a phone on her, the result of several attempts was that her phone had been turned off. According to Lin Yi's guess, it was most likely out of battery. Moreover, Lung Lung might be hiding in some deep mountain forest to train, so there was no way for her to charge her phone. Otherwise, she would not have left it alone with her passion for the phone. It's not really a way to contact them. It's just that every sect has their own special mark. When disciples go out to train, they will leave a special mark to contact others. It's the same for our Snow Sword School, Fei Yongxing answered. Lin Yi was speechless. This method was too old. It was purely the primitive method of the ancient Wulin. In modern times, this method was no different from casting a net in the sea. It was unrealistic to use this method to find Lung Lung, unless Lung Lung was nearby. The probability of that happening was even lower than winning the lottery. Tian, Fei, Lung Lung Yang. Tian, Lin. Fei Yongxing looked at him helplessly. I'm not close to her. How would I know something you don't know? But he didn't dare to complain to Lin Yi's face. He thought about it and said, The ancient passage will close in a year. All the disciples will gather at the entrance of Shenangjia Formation. You should be able to find Lung Lung. All right. Lin Yi nodded. He had heard about this from Lung Lung before, and he confirmed it with Fei Yongxing. Now that he knew that there was a way to locate Lung Lung, he wasn't in too much of a hurry anymore. It was better to return to Donghai first. Back at the villa in the district, Chen Tian and the others, other than Ling Shan, who was on duty at the Supernatural Investigation Bureau, were still there. They were all waiting at the door, waiting for Lin Yi's return. Boss, how's the situation in Snow Valley? Chen Tian asked. It's fine. It's the Archaic Alliance's Qingquan sect messing around. I chased them away after beating them up. Lin Yi smiled. Haha, you're the best, boss. Everyone cheered as they escorted Lin Yi into the room. Lin Yi stopped abruptly and turned to Fei Yongxing, who was following behind the group. Go guard the door. Don't even think about running away. I told you that I've marked you with my consciousness, and I'll kill you if you dare take half a step out of the door. Yes, don't worry, senior. I won't run, not even if you kill me. Fei Yongxing quickly swore to the heavens and became a guard. Zi was happy to see this. She turned to Qintian. Master Wu, there's a new guard for you. You can rest now. Haha, that's what I wanted. Now I can go prepare dinner for everyone. You guys just wait for the feast. Qintian grinned and went into the kitchen to cook. He'd actually been preparing for this dinner, and it didn't take long for it to be served. Everyone sat around the table laughing and chatting. Other than Meng Yao and the others who were still unconscious, it was a perfect scene. Before dinner, Lin Yi called Lin Dongfang to report to him. The old man was ready to come out again after receiving the news from Qintian and the others. But when he learned that Lin Yi was back personally, he didn't care anymore. He even said that if Lin Yi couldn't even solve a small problem like this, then he'd be eating shit for 3 years on Sky Class Island. Lin Yi almost choked to death. Although he knew that old Lin believed in his abilities, he was more willing to believe that there was another reason. The old man must have been having too much fun with Aunt Qing. He must have been busy doing those inappropriate things all day long. Even if he didn't die from ejaculation, his legs must have been too weak to walk. Say hi to Aunt Qing for me, and tell her to take it easy. Don't squeeze your old bones dry. Lin Yi yelled into the phone. Scram! Old Lin was still full of energy. Lin Yi hung up the phone with a laugh. Everyone was waiting for him to sit down, and they couldn't wait to ask, Boss, how did you come back this time? Why are you alone? Chapter 5078. Is this the Yuan Shen they were talking about? The group was puzzled. This question had been on their minds ever since they saw Lin Yi, and they'd been holding it in for an entire day. That's right. I look like a normal person right now, but this isn't a real physical body. It's just a Yuan Shen condensed from my consciousness. Not only is my strength far below my main body, but I can't stay in the common world forever. I'll have to go back when my consciousness is used up. Lin Yi nodded. That mysterious? Boss, you're too amazing. The group had a look of confusion on their faces. At their level, it was hard for them to truly understand the concept of a Yuan Shen projection. The only thing they felt was that this thing was just too amazing. It was like an illusion. Then how long can you stay this time? Lingshan and the girls were focused on a different thing. I'm not too sure, but a few months shouldn't be a problem. Lin Yi said after some thought. As long as his Yuan Shen didn't collapse like last time, a few months shouldn't be a problem. It might even be longer than he expected. He still had the star ink charcoal that Lung Lung gave him. Just a few months. Lingshan and the girls were evidently dissatisfied. They'd been separated for 3 years, and they only had a few months to reunite with each other. Plus, they had to deal with this archaic alliance thing. He didn't really have much time to spend with them. Don't be discontented. There's still a long way to go. Once I heal Meng Yao and the others, I'll have plenty of time to spend with you guys. Lin Yi comforted with a smile. You said it yourself, you can't go back on your words. The girl's eyes lit up. Alright, I won't. Lin Yi smiled. Let's talk about the archaic alliance first. I've gotten quite a bit of information. The disciples they sent to the common world are all at Foundation establishment level, the so-called Sky level. They'd be newbies on Sky Class Island at most, but they're very strong in the common world. That's why they caused such a huge commotion. No wonder these people act all high and mighty, acting all high and mighty in front of boss. They're all just newbies. I thought they'd be more powerful. Xiaobo said with a curl of his lips. I've tested them out before. These people from the Archaic Alliance all think that Sky Class Island is just a legend. And they think that Archaic Alliance is the ultimate holy land for practitioners. They even said that we mortals are frogs in a well. That tone was too funny. I almost couldn't hold it in. Lingshan laughed. No matter how strong you are, there's always someone stronger. Even I know that. But these people from the Archaic Alliance don't understand that. Seems like they're nothing much, Ziyu said with disdain. Haha, even you've improved. Lin Yi smiled. That's true, but at least in the common world, the Archaic Alliance does have what it takes to be superior. Plus, they didn't come to the common world to be enemies with us. They just wanted to recruit some talented disciples. It's not a bad idea, but these sects think they're high up. And once they do something, it'll be like Snow Sword and Qingkuan sect. It'll be easy for things to go wrong. This was the truth. If the Archaic Alliance really wanted to do something to the common world, even he wouldn't be able to stop it. He'd been recovering his strength for a month already, and the common world would have been massacred 8 to 10 times over. This won't do. At this rate, there'll be a second and third Shuegu, and the grudges will only get deeper and deeper. We'll have to be enemies then, Yu Bing frowned. That's right. If too many people die, it'll be an eye for an eye, and it'll be impossible for us to make peace. Chen Tian and the others nodded. They didn't like the Archaic Alliance, but they'd never thought of starting an all-out war with them. Even if they had a super master like Lin Yi on their side, the Archaic Alliance's overall strength was much stronger than the common world's. If they really fought, the common world's lives would be lost, and that was an outcome no one wanted to see. Strictly speaking, the Archaic Alliance has suffered 3 losses in my hands already. Releasing those 4 from Qingkuan sect will definitely attract attention. It's time to have a good talk with the people in charge. We can't let them do as they please, Lin Yi said solemnly. The common world didn't have the power to negotiate with the Archaic Alliance, but now that there was an anomaly like him, there was a chance for them to sit down and talk. After all, the Archaic Alliance weren't idiots, and going all out wouldn't do them any good. Instead, more people would die in Lin Yi's hands, and that wouldn't be worth it. Yes, that's what we were thinking. Chen Tian and the others nodded. They were thinking of using a primordial spirit practitioner to intimidate the enemy, but they didn't expect their boss to be that mysterious primordial spirit practitioner himself. This made things even more convenient. But where do we go to find these people? Kong Xiaobo asked. That's easy, Xue Jianfeng's locked up there. We just need to interrogate him, Ling Shan said. No need for all that trouble, they're actually in Shenangjia. That's the portal to the archaic small Jianghu. We'll find them there for sure. But as far as I know, the Archaic Alliance is a very loose organization, and the people who came out to the common world to train probably don't have any high-level people. I don't know if there's anyone who can really make decisions, Lin Yi frowned. The group was speechless. The worst thing that could happen was that they'd talk to the Archaic Alliance, but that person's words didn't work, and the other ancient sects were still doing whatever they wanted with Qingkuan sect. They'd really be coughing up blood if that happened. What's the point of guessing here? Isn't there a guard outside? It's better to ask him than to guess, right? Ziyu curled her lips. Yeah. Everyone's eyes lit up. Lin Yi called Fei Yangxing in. Who's the person in charge of the Archaic Alliance? Chapter 5079. No leader. Lin Yi's frown deepened. Then when something big happens this time, you people from the Archaic Alliance would gather together to discuss countermeasures, right? You're just saying your own thing. And there's really no one who can lead the way? Fei Yangxing thought for a moment and said, that's not necessarily the case. Although it's up to each sect to decide, there's an uncle master leading the expedition in the secular world this time. However, everyone feels that the expedition in the secular world isn't difficult at all, so that Uncle Master isn't in charge of anything. He's only in charge of opening and closing the primordial passageway. Who is it? What's his strength? Lin Yi asked. It's a leader of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. His name is Exionijia. I heard that he is a master at the early stage of Gold Core Realm. He is the strongest among all the people in the secular world this time. He may show up this time, but I don't know whether he will come out to take charge or not, Fei Yangxing said carefully. After all, the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island had not suffered any losses so far. Instead, competitors such as the Snow Sword sect and the Qingkuan sect suffered losses. Exionijia was likely to continue to ignore them. If the other sects were all badly hurt in the secular world this time, the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island would be the dominant sect in the future. The Blue Cloud sect in the North Island? Lin Yi was stunned. What the hell? Why do the names of these archaic sects coincide with the Heaven Stage Island? He could ignore the Snow Sword sect, which could be regarded as a pure coincidence. But now there was another one, and it was called the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. You won't tell me that there are Soaring sect and Xuanji sect in the Archaic Alliance, will you? Linny couldn't help but ask with a strange expression. Yes, the 3 sects in the North Island are like brothers, and each of them is a first-class sect in the Archaic Alliance. Many of the elders in the Alliance are from the 3 sects in the North Island. Senior, how do you know this? Fei Yongxing felt a little strange. In his opinion, although Linny was powerful, he was just a primordial spirit in the secular world. There was no reason for him to know about the small Jianghu in the primitive times. After all, the primitive passage only opened once in 1,000 years. Linny ignored him. At this moment he was completely speechless. If this was a fucking coincidence, his head could be twisted off and kicked like a ball. Just a moment ago, he said that the people of the Archaic Alliance were narrow-minded and thought that Heaven Step Island was just a rumor. But now, a bunch of sects with the same name as Heaven Step Island had popped up, especially the 3 great gates of the Northern Island. Linny believed that there must be some kind of connection between the two. It was just that this connection might not be known by ordinary disciples. So, if I were to negotiate with the Archaic Alliance, this Xian Igia that you mentioned is the only candidate. Linny put aside his doubts and returned to the topic at hand. Yes, he is the only one who can suppress the other primordial sects in terms of status and strength. If even he can't do it, then no one can. Fei Yongxing nodded. Yes, he is the only one who can suppress the other primordial sections. Okay, then go and tell him that the president of the Cultivators Association, Lin Yi, has invited him to meet at the Supernatural Investigation Bureau, Linny said immediately. This, Fei Yongxing immediately flinched. He was now a traitor to the Archaic Alliance. Although the incident with Xue Jianfeng should not have been spread back, he still felt very guilty. Asking him to pass a message to Xianijia at this time would be playing with fire. Why? You don't want to go? Lin Yi's face darkened. No, senior, I will definitely do as you say. Fei Yongxing was shocked and quickly said, but I can only try my best. I can't say that I will definitely meet Uncle Master Xian. I just hope that I can pass the message. Should I go now? Go. Linny nodded and then said, oh, by the way, go there and ask about Lung Lung. Maybe she has already gone back. Yes. Fei Yongxing left immediately, carrying Lin Yi's spirit imprint on him. No matter what Linny told him, he had to do it. He wouldn't dare say no. Ziyu called out as soon as Fei Yongxing left. Linny bro, who's Lung Lung? It wasn't just Ziyu. Ling Shan and the others were all concerned as well. As for Wu Chintian and the others, they were all looking left and right. From Lin Yi's tone, they knew that this was a new sis-in-law. She's someone from the Archaic Alliance that I met before. You'll meet her in the future, Linny blushed. Seeing that Ziyu was about to ask, Chuntian quickly changed the topic and helped Linny out. He said that Xianijia is an early-phase Golden Core Master. What's your strength now, boss? Foundation Establishment Full Circle. This Yuan Shin of mine is far from the level of my main body. I won't be able to level up for now, Linny said. Doesn't that mean you can't compare to him? The group couldn't help but worry. Because of Lin Yi's influence, they knew their levels very well. Facing a Golden Core early phase, as a Foundation Establishment Full Circle, was a different level altogether. It's a bit difficult, but it's just a negotiation. We might not even start fighting. Plus, even if we do start fighting, we don't know who will win. Linny smiled faintly. His Yuan Shen's ability to challenge higher levels was a big weakness compared to his main body. But compared to others, it was already very impressive. If he really used all his skills, he might not lose to an early-phase Golden Core practitioner. But Linny was worried that there might be other hidden masters other than Xianijia in the Archaic Alliance. That would be troublesome. He hoped that Fei Yongxing's information was true. After all, from a normal person's point of view, a Golden Core early-phase master coming to the common world was already a big deal. People stronger than this wouldn't even bother to come. As Lin Yi and the group continued with the banquet, Fei Yongxing rushed to Shenangjia overnight and went straight to the meeting point, asking to see Xianijia of the Green Cloud sect. He didn't have much hope in this. After all, when Yin Jiping and Sun Baimei were killed, Xianijia didn't even show up. Instead, it was Xue Jianfeng who stood out. He was just a normal disciple of the Snow Sword sect, so he didn't have much confidence in meeting Xianijia. But unexpectedly, the whole process went surprisingly smoothly. Fei Yongxing met Xianijia very quickly. Chapter 5080. Yes, I was asked to bring a message to you, Martial Uncle Xian. Lin Yi, the president of the Secular World Cultivators Association, invites you to meet him at the Supernatural Investigation Bureau, Fei Yongxing said respectfully. The president of the Secular World Cultivators Association, Lin Yi? I've never heard of him before. Xianijia shook his head, showing a lack of interest. Asking him, an expert in the early stage of the Gold Core realm, from the Archaic Alliance, to meet a cultivator from the secular world sounded ridiculous. Did Lin Yi think too highly of himself? No, I believe you must have heard of him. He's the primordial spirit cultivator. Fei Yongxing thought for a while, and told him everything that Lin Yi had done. Yin Jiping and Sun Baimei from the Bixia sect were killed by him. Xue Jianfeng, the eldest senior brother of the Snow Sword sect, had his elixir field destroyed. Yu Zhengliang, and the other 3 from the Qianquan sect, were also beaten up badly by him in the Snow Valley. What? He did all these? Xianijia was shocked. In fact, he had heard about what happened in the Snow Valley from Yu Zhengliang, but he didn't know who Lin Yi was. He didn't expect him to be the primordial spirit cultivator who had caused a stir. What's more, this guy had destroyed Xue Jianfeng's elixir field. Xianijia's expression suddenly became solemn. Xue Jianfeng was known as the strongest expert in the Foundation establishment realm in the Archaic Alliance. If even his elixir field was destroyed, then this primordial spirit cultivator's strength must be at the peak of Foundation establishment realm, or at least the Gold Core realm. Yes, I'm telling the truth, Fei Yongxing promised. It's incredible that there's such an expert in the secular world. Xianijia murmured to himself. Even he might not be able to deal with an expert of this level. So he had to be careful. As the person in charge of the training in the secular world, Xianijia didn't mind letting the disciples of other sects get into trouble, but he couldn't control the situation if it got so big. Otherwise, not only would the disciples of the Green Cloud sect in the North Island be in trouble, but he would also be severely punished by the Elders Association of the Archaic Alliance. He couldn't afford the consequences. Do you know where he came from? Xianijia asked. I don't know. I only know that he's a primordial spirit cultivator. Fei Yongxing shook his head. A primordial spirit cultivator. Xianijia pondered for a moment and thought to himself, could this person be a powerful primordial spirit cultivator that was left in the secular world during the primordial times? Otherwise, I've never heard of any cultivators in the secular world reaching the state of Heaven Wei. As a result, he had successfully become the president of the Cultivator Association. Now that things had developed to this stage, he couldn't ignore it no matter what. Xianijia immediately said, go and tell him that I agree to the meeting this time. The Supernatural Investigation Bureau, right? I'll go and meet this primordial spirit cultivator. Fei Xingyang was overjoyed. He didn't know what Xianijia would do to him if he couldn't do what Xianijia asked. He'd be in a lot of trouble if he took it out on him. Fortunately, Xianijia took it seriously this time and agreed so quickly. After setting the time, Fei Yongxing returned to Donghai and told Lin Yi exactly what Xianijia said. Of course, he did all sorts of things in secret and in the open. He was hoping that Lin Yi would let him go if he was happy. Very well, Lingshan. Let's go to the Supernatural Investigation Bureau now. Lin Yi nodded. Lin Yi bro, I want to go too. Ziyu said excitedly. Yeah boss, let's go together. At least we'll be able to boost our reputation. Chuntian and the others followed. Imposing. Lin Yi said as he looked at them speechless. Do you guys think this is a normal gang negotiation? The boss is sitting together, and the lackeys are standing in a line behind him. Do you guys have to change into black suits and sunglasses? Yeah, right? Lin Yi was speechless. Haha, that's not impossible. I remember Zhong Pingliang now. Kong Xiaobo nodded. Screw you. Just stay here and take care of Ming Yao and the others for me. Lingshan and I will go to the Supernatural Investigation Bureau. Lin Yi waved his hand, not sure if he should cry or laugh. But Pimyong's not bad. He's been working with me on Sky Class Island. The opponent was an early-phase Golden Core Master after all. If things didn't work out, and they ended up fighting, Lin Yi would be able to protect himself with his current strength. Taking care of one person was already his limit, and if everyone went with him, he'd be holding back. Lingshan, on the other hand, was the vice director of the Supernatural Investigation Bureau. Bringing her along was a matter of course. Otherwise Lin Yi wouldn't even bring her along. After much persuasion, Lin Yi finally managed to convince the group to go with Lingshan to the HQ. As for Fei Yongsheng, he was left behind to guard the door. The guy was a Foundation establishment stage, after all, and Lin Yi didn't have to worry about him suddenly betraying them. His presence was a deterrent to the other Archaic Alliance disciples. Even if he wasn't as strong as the guy, he could at least stall for time. Lin Yi was still in the passenger seat, but the chauffeur was Lingshan. He couldn't help but ask curiously, as he watched the silly girl's lips curl up uncontrollably. Did something happen to your face? You're the one who slapped. Lingshan's face darkened, but her lips curled back up in the blink of an eye. She stuttered. It feels so good to have just you and me. Lin Yi jumped at the sight of Lingshan closing her eyes. Don't close your eyes. You're still driving. Don't close your eyes. Lingshan rolled her eyes at him, muttering, You're such an insensitive blockhead. Lin Yi smiled bitterly. Naturally, he knew that Lingshan wanted to spend some alone time with him. But it was a shame that he owed so many girlfriends. Even if he spent all his time with them, it wouldn't be possible for him to spend some alone time with them. It was a normal thing for normal girls, but for Lingshan and the others, it was a luxury. Lin Yi owed them far too much. Lin Yi was filled with guilt, but Lingshan didn't think much of it. To her, having some alone time in the car was enough. After all, in her eyes, Lin Yi was someone who was destined to shake the world. If Lin Yi were to be like the others, hanging around women all day, she wouldn't even be interested in him. The two arrived at the HQ, and it wasn't long before a white-bearded old man came to see them. Chapter 5081. This was very normal. He was a master in the early stage of Gold Core from the Archaic Alliance. If he still took these people from the Supernatural Investigation Bureau seriously, then he really had to be on his guard. After all, they might have ulterior motives. But this almost indifferent attitude was not a bad thing for them. At least they could mind their own business. However, after seeing Lin Yi, the white-bearded old man's indifferent expression immediately disappeared and was replaced with a solemn expression. He could be considered to have a lot of experience. Although Lin Yi's aura was restrained and he didn't show it, he still exuded an unfathomable aura. Intuition told the white-bearded old man that this person was definitely not someone to be trifled with. I'm Exionegia, an elder of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island of the Archaic Alliance. I'm the person in charge of this experiential learning in the secular world. Are you Lin Yi? Exionegia asked seriously. Yes, please sit down. Lin Yi smiled politely. In fact, he felt quite strange at the moment. He was a genuine disciple of the North Island, but the other party actually called himself an elder of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island. This kind of dislocation made him speechless. Suppressing the strange feeling in his heart, Lin Yi exchanged a few words with the other party seriously. After all, he was a master in the early stage of Gold Core. In terms of strength, the other party actually had the upper hand. Moreover, the other party was backed by the Archaic Alliance. Even if Lin Yi did not shed all pretense of cordiality, he had to be polite to him. Otherwise, there would be nothing to talk about. Exionegia speculated that Lin Yi was a powerful primordial spirit from the Archaic era. At this time, seeing Lin Yi's extraordinary temperament, he naturally would not be too arrogant. Strength determined the right to speak. It was natural for him to ignore the low-strength cultivators in the secular world. But if he also ignored Lin Yi, then it could only mean that there was something wrong with his brain. Being able to become the person in charge of the training in the secular world, it was obvious that there was no problem with his brain. On the contrary, this person was a smooth and slick person. Otherwise, if he only relied on his strength to suppress them, So many ancient sects might not necessarily listen to him. President Lin, I'm here today to sort out the unpleasantness between the Archaic Alliance and the secular world. We need to find out who is right and who is wrong. Otherwise, if the hatred between the two sides deepens, it will not be a good thing for both the Archaic Alliance and the secular world. I believe President Lin agrees on this point. Exionegia went straight to the point. Of course, the secular world is our home. No one wants their home to be on fire. This time, I specially invited Elder Exane here to come here to clarify the matter. I hope that the Archaic Alliance can control the behavior of disciples in the future to avoid any friction. Linny nodded. Alright, then let's talk about the Qingkuan sect. The one who injured Yu Zhongliang, and the other three was President Lin, right? Also, I heard that Xue Jianfeng from the Snow Sword faction also had his Dantian destroyed by you? Exionegia confirmed. That's right. These two things are true. I didn't want to do anything to them, but they went too far and crossed the line. Naturally, they should suffer a little. Linny nodded and said faintly, the secular world has its own rules. If the Archaic Alliance wants to pick disciples from the secular world, it's fine. As long as the cultivators themselves agree, we won't stop you. However, if you want to forcefully take them, then there's nothing more to say. I know a little about what happened in Xuegu. It was indeed the sect of Qingkuan that acted impulsively and turned a good thing into a bad thing. They have nothing to say about being beaten up. As for the matter of Xue Jianfeng, they went straight to Lin Yi. It's reasonable for Lin Yi to destroy his Dantian in a fit of rage. I have nothing to say about that. Exionegia admitted to the two things without hesitation. On the one hand, he was in the wrong, and on the other hand, it had nothing to do with him. Anyway, it was not the people of his Green Cloud sect in the North Island who got hurt. The leading senior brothers of these sects were unreliable, so they could not blame others, let alone Exionegia. Elder Exion is indeed a reasonable man. Linny was a little surprised. Exionegia nodded. He was relieved that Exionegia was so easygoing. He hated those who thought highly of themselves, but refused to admit their mistakes. If they couldn't be reasoned with, they could only solve it with their fists. That was the last thing he wanted to see. However, regarding the matter of Yin Jiping and Sun Baimei from the evil warding sect, Linny killed them without hesitation. Isn't that a little unreasonable? Exionegia's face darkened. He didn't care if the people from other sects were injured or disabled, but it was different when two people were killed. As the person in charge of the team, he would be punished by the Archaic Alliance if he didn't have a reasonable reason. I'm a primordial spirit cultivator. The two of them attacked me immediately. Elder Exion, you should know what they wanted to do, right? Since they wanted to devour me, I had to kill them out of self-defense. Is there anything wrong with that? Linny asked back. Exionegia was at a loss for words. Self-defense was justified no matter where it was. Even in the archaic underworld, there wouldn't be a different result. Since the two of them wanted to kill Lin Yi, they naturally had to be prepared to be killed by Lin Yi. Even if they died, it would be in vain. If Elder Exion thinks that I deserve to be devoured by them, then I'm afraid there's no need for us to talk anymore. I'll make it clear first. No matter who wants to hurt me or the people around me, I will kill him without hesitation. Remember, no matter who it is, Linny said in a tough tone. Exionegia took a deep look at him. At this moment, he suddenly felt an inexplicable aura. It wasn't the kind of aura that could tell one's cultivation level, but he vaguely felt that the person in front of him was an unfathomable supermaster. Logically speaking, as a master in the early stage of Gold Core Realm, he was already invincible in the secular world. However, at this moment his heart trembled instinctively. He felt that he was like a lowly ant in front of the person in front of him. His life and death were in the hands of the person in front of him, and he had no power to resist. How is this possible? Exionegia was stunned. He shook his head hard in disbelief. Although his intuition had always been very accurate, this sudden thought was too ridiculous. Not to mention in the secular world, even in the Archaic Alliance, a master in the early stage of Gold Core Realm, like him, was not a lowly existence. Although his strength was far inferior to those old monsters in the nascent soul realm, it was basically impossible for him to be easily killed like an ant. What did you say? Lin Yi's expression changed. He thought that the person in front of him was refuting him. If this went on, it would be impossible for them to come to an agreement. Although it was the last resort, he had no choice but to fight. Chapter 5082. Oh, it's nothing. Xianijia came back to his senses. He shook his head and said, "Don't be nervous, President Lin. In fact, I don't think it's wrong for you to kill Yin Jiping and Sun Bai Mei. It's unwise to destroy the good relationship between the Archaic Alliance and the secular world because of this." That's good. Thank you for your understanding, Elder Xian. Lin Yi and Lingshan looked at each other and breathed out in relief. I'm just stating the facts, not trying to do you a favor, so you don't have to thank me. Xianijia said calmly. That moment was just an illusion, but it made him believe that Lin Yi had a powerful background, so he didn't want to make an enemy out of him. There was no need to make an enemy out of him over something so unimportant. Of course, there was another reason. Evil Warding Sect wasn't considered strong in Archaic Alliance, and they had always been weird and unreasonable. They weren't very popular in Archaic Alliance, and they made enemies everywhere. Naturally, he wouldn't stand up for two dead people from Evil Warding Sect, but if it were a mainstream sect like Snow Sword School, his attitude might change. With Elder Xian's status, it's already a blessing for the common world to be able to be impartial and talk about the facts. If it were someone else, it wouldn't be easy. Lin Yi smiled faintly. From the beginning until now, Xianijia had accepted almost everything Lin Yi said. Although it was true, it was rare for an early-stage Golden Core expert of the Archaic Alliance to listen to him calmly. Lin Yi's impression of Xianijia had improved a lot. Xianijia's attitude towards Lin Yi improved a lot. You're being too polite, President Lin. In fact, the Archaic Alliance has always been separated from the secular world. It's just that the two worlds are separated from each other. It can be said that we share the same origin, so we've never had any hostile thoughts towards the secular world. Instead of saying that this trip to the secular world is an experience for the disciples of each sect, it's more like a homecoming, said Xianijia with the intention of building a closer relationship. Since that's the case, I hope Elder Xian can restrain the disciples of the Archaic Alliance so that they don't cause trouble again and again. Lin Yi sternly said, "To be honest with you, President Lin, we the Archaic Alliance have already made it clear that no disciple is allowed to destroy the order of the secular world. The reason for these conflicts is just because of the difference in background between the two parties. There's no malice at all," Xianijia evaded. The difference in background is understandable, but there is also an old saying that when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Just now, Elder Xian also said that you are returning home, so you should abide by the rules of the secular world, right? Lin Yi said lightly. Speaking of when in Rome, do as the Romans do, I have a question. I hope you can enlighten me. Xianijia suddenly changed the topic. Oh. Lin Yi raised his eyebrows. Chairman Lin is from the secular world, right? Xianijia asked. Of course. Lin Yi nodded. Although he had stayed on the Heaven Stage Island for 3 years, he was born and raised in the secular world after all. He was a native of the secular world. Since you're from the secular world, you should have existed for a long time, since you're only at the primordial soul realm. Could it be that you're a powerful primordial soul realm cultivator from the primordial age? Xianijia asked. The real reason why he came today and behaved so nicely was that he guessed that Lin Yi was a powerful figure from the primordial age. That was why he dared not provoke him. Lin Yi took a deep look at Xianijia's expression and nodded. That's right. Originally, I wouldn't reveal my background to anyone. However, since you've asked about it, I don't mind telling you since we have a close relationship. A close relationship? Xianijia was taken aback. Even if Lin Yi was a powerful figure from the primordial age, where did the word close relationship come from? Lin Yi gave Lingshan a look, signaling her to close the door. Lingshan smirked. She knew that Lin Yi was lying when she saw his expression. She stood up and closed the door. She even stayed outside on purpose. She was afraid that she would expose herself if she didn't keep a straight face. Today's matter is between my mouth and your ears. No one else can know about it. Do you understand? Lin Yi said solemnly. Huh. Xianijia was even more stunned. Lin Yi's tone was that of a normal practitioner from the secular world. Now he was acting like a senior. Thinking back to the inexplicable fear he felt earlier, could it be that this primordial soul had a special relationship with him? Xianijia, you're a junior. Your sex ancestor is here. Why aren't you greeting him? Lin Yi scolded suddenly. What? Xianijia was stunned. What the hell? Sex ancestor? Humph. I'm from the primordial North Island's Blue Cloud sect. Speaking of which, you're from the same sect as me. I didn't want to reveal this relationship before. But now that I've revealed it, shouldn't you greet him? Lin Yi humphed coldly. Although he had said this on the spur of the moment, it wasn't necessarily empty words. Just from the names of the sects, he could roughly determine that the Archaic Alliance's 3 great gates of the Northern Island and the Heavenly Island's 3 great pavilions of the Northern Island were inextricably linked. Otherwise, there was no way to explain the strange names of the 2 sections. Although it was risky for him to do so, he was quite confident. If he didn't guess it wrong, he, the disciple of the Heavenly Island's Blue Cloud Pavilion, and the Archaic Alliance's Blue Cloud sect's North Island's Blue Cloud sect's disciple were from the same sect. Chapter 5083. To be a man of Blue Cloud, I have 3 signs and 6 orifices. Lin Yi said word by word in a calm tone. This was the basic mantra that Meng Jueguang taught them when they first entered the Welcome Pavilion. Every disciple of the Blue Cloud Pavilion had a copy, but most of them just looked at it. Very few of them put in the effort to practice it. After all, it was not a profound cultivation method. Lin Yi, of course, wasn't going to waste his time on this, but he'd done some research on it before, and he had a photographic memory too, so he was able to memorize it easily. Initially, Xianijia had a disdainful look on his face. However, his expression changed when he heard the original version of the green cloud calming spell. However, he did not believe it. Although outsiders usually only knew the name of the green cloud calming spell, very few of them knew the specific mantra. However, there were always exceptions. There were so many disciples of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. It was not strange for someone to accidentally leak the green cloud calming spell. If someone could pretend to be a senior of the sect, just by reciting a few mantra, Xianijia would be a fool. You don't have to lie to yourself anymore. Xianijia was about to stop Lin Yi, but he was stunned. The green cloud calming spell that Lin Yi recited seemed to be slightly different from what he knew. Although 99% of it was the same, there were a few minor but crucial changes. Xianijia relied on the spell of Clear Cloud Heart Calming to reach his current level of strength. He knew everything about the spell of Clear Cloud Heart Calming. If it was someone else, they might laugh at Lin Yi for being an unprofessional liar, who could not even recite the incantation correctly. However, Xianijia knew that Lin Yi was reciting the real spell of Clear Cloud Heart Calming. No wonder I felt something was wrong when I was practicing. It turns out that the mantra is wrong. It's obviously smoother after the changes. Xianijia could not help but murmur. Meanwhile, Lin Yi was still reciting. Xianijia was shocked again as he listened. What? There's more? There's a mantra for the Gold Core realm. The green cloud calming spell only had 353 words. Theoretically, it could only be used to the full completion of foundation establishment. In other words, disciples like him who had cultivated to the early stage of the Gold Core realm had to change to a higher level. However, the length of Lin Yi's recitation was already more than 500 words. The rest was the mantra for the Gold Core realm. It wouldn't mean anything if he just memorized the Clear Cloud Heart Calming mantra word for word. But now, not only did he memorize the original version, he even had the mantra for the Golden Core stage. This wasn't something that an outsider could do. There was only one explanation. Lin Yi was indeed a disciple of the Green Cloud sect in the North Island. Moreover, he was much older than Xianijia, so he knew the original version of the Green Cloud calming spell. As for the ready-made green cloud calming spell of the Green Cloud sect in the North Island, it was just an incomplete version left behind after the turmoil of the sect. After Linny had recited more than 800 words of the Green Cloud calming spell, Exayanija finally did not hesitate anymore. He knelt down on the spot and saluted in fear and trepidation. "So you're really the ancestor of the Green Cloud sect in the North Island. I was blind to have offended you. Please punish me, Granduncle Master." "It's nothing. Ignorance is not a crime. Get up." Linny waved his hand faintly, but let out a sigh of relief inwardly. It was fortunate that he hadn't gambled wrongly. The art of calming heart that hadn't been of much use before was now of great use. Having a good memory really did have a lot of benefits. "Yes, thank you, Granduncle Master." Exayanija immediately got up respectfully. His expression when looking at Lin, he was no longer as superior as before. Instead, his attitude was extremely humble. The rules of the three sects in the North Island were strict. The person in front of him was a real ancestor senior, who had mastered the original version of the Green Cloud calming spell. He might even know more mental cultivation methods that had been lost. He was a living treasure to the entire Green Cloud sect in the North Island. Exayanija had no choice but to be respectful. Looking at Exayanija's attitude, Linny suddenly felt that his risk this time was too wise. Although failure would definitely cause Exayanija's hostility, high risk also meant high reward. Now that he had become Exayanija's Granduncle Master, the problem between the secular world and the archaic alliance would naturally be solved. Not only that, Exayanija's reaction also confirmed all of Lin Yi's previous speculations. At least one thing was confirmed, that the Green Cloud sect in the North Island of the Archaic Alliance and the Blue Cloud Pavilion in the North Island of the Heavenly Stage Island were indeed of the same origin. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to share the Green Cloud calming spell, which was an iconic mental cultivation method. Similarly, the Soaring sect and the Xuanji sect in the North Island were probably in the same situation. Linny privately speculated that there should be two possibilities. Maybe the people who founded the three sects in the North Island of the Archaic Alliance actually came from the three pavilions in the North Island of the Heavenly Stage Island. That was why the names and mental cultivation methods of the three sects were exactly the same. Of course, the reverse was not completely impossible, but judging from the disparity in strength between the two sects, the possibility was really very small. It was impossible to say that a group of people came from the three sects in the North Island of the Archaic Alliance, ran to the Heavenly Stage Island, and suddenly increased their strength and brought the three pavilions to greater heights, right? However, the two together could only be regarded as the same possibility. Linny had another more daring speculation in his mind. Perhaps in the distant Archaic era, the Heavenly Stage Island and the Archaic Small Underworld were originally the same place. Then one day, due to a sudden change, the place was split into two isolated planes. One of them was called the Heavenly Stage Island, and the other was called the Archaic Small Underworld. The sects in these two places were of the same origin, and should have been about the same level. However, because the spiritual chi in the Archaic Small Underworld was far inferior to that of the Heavenly Stage Island, it gradually declined. Day after day, year after year, it formed the current situation. Both of these possibilities existed, but Linny was more inclined to the latter, because if the ancestors of the Archaic Alliance came from the Heavenly Stage Island, they would inevitably leave behind clear records about the Heavenly Stage Island. Now that the Heavenly Stage Island was considered to be nothing more than a rumor in the Archaic Small Underworld, it could be seen that this possibility was not high. However, the second possibility was more likely to explain all of this. After the two sects split, they did not know the specific situation of the other side, and they might even think that the other side had already been destroyed. As time passed, naturally no one would mention it, and there would not be any clear records left, which led to the current situation. Chapter 5084. Yeah, although I'm from the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island, I've been in the secular world for so many years. I don't want to meddle in other people's business anymore. Now that I've revealed my identity to you, I have to ask about the current situation of the Archaic Alliance. Tell me the general situation. Lin Yi seized the opportunity to ask. Yes. Exynegia was not surprised. He thought that since Lin Yi was the ancestral master of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island, he should go back to the Blue Cloud sect to have a look after his identity was revealed. Of course, he had to learn more about the Archaic Alliance. He asked, "What do you want to know? Just tell me about the current power structure of the Archaic Alliance." Lin Yi said faintly. This was the most basic and important information. Only by understanding it in detail could he have a clear idea of the real strength of the Archaic Alliance. Knowing oneself and knowing the enemy would provide a reference for future countermeasures. All right. All the forces in the primordial underworld are divided into two types, the sects and the clans. Among all the sects and clans, the top 4 sects and clans are followed by the top 10 sects and clans, followed by some ordinary cultivation sects and clans, Exynegia explained. Oh, how do you differentiate the 4 major sects and families, the 10 small sects and families, and ordinary sects and families? Lin Yi asked carefully. Of course, it's based on the strength of each sect and family. In addition to the basic number of disciples and strength, the most important criterion is the number of top masters in each sect and family. To put it bluntly, it's actually the number of nascent soul realm old monsters. Exynegia continued. Tell me more. This was the question that Lin Yi was most concerned about. It seemed that the most powerful people in the Archaic Alliance were in the nascent soul realm. However, he had to hear more about the exact number. Each of the 4 most powerful sects and families has at least 3 old monsters in the nascent soul realm, while the next 10 small sects and families have more or less 1 or 2 old monsters in the nascent soul realm. Just like our Blue Cloud sect in the North Island, we have 1 old monster in the nascent soul realm, who is the Grand Supreme Elder, who is currently in closed-door training. That's why we can be one of the 10 small sects and families. If we don't have old monsters in the nascent soul realm, we can only be ordinary sects and families, Exynegia said. Lin Yi couldn't help but feel shocked. Since the disciples of the Archaic Alliance who came to the secular world were only at the foundation establishment stage, and even Exynegia, who was responsible for leading the team, was only at the early stage of Gold Core. He thought that even if there were nascent soul old monsters in the Archaic Alliance, there would be very few of them. However, according to what Exynegia said, there were at least 20 to 30 old monsters in the Archaic Alliance. This number was incomparable to the Heaven Stage Island, which was full of experts. However, it was much better than what Lin Yi had imagined. According to what Exynegia said, the Archaic Alliance should not be underestimated. 2 years ago, old monsters in the nascent soul realm were people that Lin Yi had to look up to. Even on the Heaven Stage Island, they could become the elders of a sect. He didn't expect that there were so many of them in the Archaic Alliance. Blue Cloud sect is one of the 10 small sects and families. How are Rising Sky sect and Xuanji sect doing now? Lin Yi asked. Rising Sky sect has 2 old monsters in the nascent soul realm, which is also one of the 10 small sects and families. As for Xuanji sect, it hasn't been doing well in the past 2 years. The original old monster in the nascent soul realm is missing, so it was removed from the 10 small sects and families. Now it can only be regarded as an ordinary sect. Exynegia sighed. The 3 sects of the North Island were like brothers. Although there were all kinds of open and secret fights between them, they were always united against outsiders. Although they could only be ranked as one of the 10 small sects and families, if the 3 sects of the North Island were put together, even the most powerful 4 sects and families would not dare to underestimate them. Now that Xuanji sect had declined, it was inevitable that they would feel interdependent. By the way, there's a question I wanted to ask just now. Why did you add the North Island before the 3 sects? Is there another island in the Archaic underworld? Lin Yi asked thoughtfully. Oh, there's a question I wanted to ask just now. Why did you add the North Island before the 3 sects? Is there another island in the Archaic underworld? Lin Yi asked thoughtfully. Exynegia suddenly became suspicious. However, since Lenny had just recited the entire original version of the green cloud calming technique to him. He did not suspect that Lin Yi was a liar again. He just felt that Lin Yi's question was strange. No, at least during my time, it was only called Blue Cloud Sect, but I wouldn't add the North Island in front of it. Lin Yi made up a story in a serious manner. He was sure that Xianijia did not know much about the archaic era. After all, it was hard to verify this kind of thing, unless he could find the real seniors of the sect, who survived from the archaic era, and confront them face to face. Even then, Lin Yi could make up a story without thinking. No one would really care about this kind of thing that had nothing to do with core interests. Well, Xianijia was stumped by the question as expected. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. Although I'm already an elder in the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island, I really don't know much about these things. I only know that I've been called the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island since I was young. But it's normal. After all, geographically speaking, the three sects are located in the north of the archaic underworld. It's not an exaggeration to say that it's the North Island across the lake. Besides, the three sects of the North Island also belong to the Cultivation North Alliance. The Cultivation North Alliance. Lin Yi was stunned. Yes, the Archaic Alliance is just a unified name. In fact, it's made up of 5 top forces. They are divided into East, West, South, North, and Central. The 3 sects of the North Island, and some other sects and families belong to the Cultivation North Island Alliance, also known as the Cultivation North Alliance. Meanwhile, the Snow Sword faction and the Thousand Blades faction belong to the Cultivation Central Alliance. The Qingquan sect and the Evil Warding sect belong to the Cultivation South Alliance. There's also the Cultivation ASEAN Alliance and the Cultivation West Alliance, Xianijia explained. Lin Yi was completely speechless. Wasn't this just a copy of the 5 major islands of Heaven stage? Other than some differences in details, the overall layout was almost the same. Now, he was even more convinced of his bold conjecture that the Heaven stage island and the archaic underworld came from the same mother's womb. Grandmaster, the strength of the Grand Five Alliance is determined by the strength of the sects and families under its jurisdiction. Other than that, the Grand Five Alliance also has exclusive forces. But I don't know much about them. Only by joining the elders of the Alliance can I get hold of these core secrets. My current level is far from enough, Xianijia said embarrassedly. Chapter 5085. The only reason he was able to become the person in charge of the training in the mortal world was because the people from the Archaic Alliance had their eyes on the top of their heads. They simply didn't place the mortal world in their eyes. If it really was a lucrative job, it wouldn't have fallen to him, even in 10,000 years. Alright, I got it. Lin Yi nodded. Being able to learn so much from Xianijia was already a pleasant surprise. He only wanted to get a rough idea of the Archaic Alliance's strength. As for the deeper secrets, he didn't need to dig into them, as it was useless at the moment. That's all I know about the power structure of the Archaic Underworld. I wonder if there's anything else you want to know? Xianijia asked respectfully. Not at the moment. I'll look for you in the future. Lin Yi waved his hand and went back to the topic. Let's talk about the secular world today. It's understandable that the Archaic Alliance wants to recruit new disciples with sufficient qualifications. But don't look for people blindly. If we make things clear, I believe many cultivators in the secular world will want to go. There's no need to make the relationship so tense, as it will only backfire. Low-level cultivators always yearned for higher levels. This was common sense. Back then, Heavenly Stage Island had only sent Southern Aurora Polaris as a symbolic guide, but everyone still wanted to go in. Now it was the same logic in the Archaic Alliance. It was just that Xue Jianfeng, Yu Zhengliang, and the others were too overbearing and unyielding. They didn't treat the cultivators of the secular world as humans, so naturally, no one was willing to follow them. You're right, Grandmaster. I didn't expect the sects to act so recklessly. I've repeatedly ordered not to disturb the order of the secular world, but it still turned out to be like this. I'll go back and make an appearance. I'll gather all the training disciples and forbid them from messing around in the secular world. Exanija said sincerely. All right, thank you for your hard work. Lenny nodded, thinking that the identity of Grandmaster was indeed different. Although Exanija was easy to talk to, he would not agree to this kind of thing immediately. He would definitely use all sorts of excuses. It was worth it that a mere J-Cloud calming technique could be so useful. I'll take my leave now. I'll pay my respects to Grandmaster another day. Exanija stood up and said, Take care, I won't be sending you off. Lenny smiled and personally escorted Exanija out of the Supernatural Investigation Bureau. Looking at Exanija's receding figure, Lenny let out a sigh of relief. Today's ordeal was finally over. What do you think? Did you deceive that person? Lingshan said with a smile. She could tell from Lin Yi and Exanija's expressions that today's negotiation was going to be a success. How could it be a lie? I'm just stating the facts and reasoning with him, okay? Lenny curled his lips. Really? Lingshan's face was full of disbelief. Exanija looked easier to talk to than Xue Jianfeng. But the superiority of the Archaic Alliance was ingrained in their bones. She didn't believe that Exanija would be able to convince them so easily. Of course it's true. If it was someone else telling him this, it might be useless. But I'm his martial granduncle. If he doesn't listen to me, wouldn't that be disgraceful? Lenny asked with a smile. You're his master. Lingshan's jaw almost dropped to the floor. Unbelievable? I don't really believe it myself. But he's willing to believe it. There's nothing I can do about it. Since he's so sincere, I'll just take the loss. It's all for the common world after all. Lenny said with a who's going to hell if I don't go to hell face. Ha 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 ha. Lingshan almost couldn't hold back her laughter when she saw that funny face of his. She tricked him into becoming his master's master. And he still felt like he was taking the loss? Then what about this grand disciple of hers? Did he take advantage of her? You're a girl after all. Do you have to be that carefree in public? I can see you eating breakfast. Lenny said with a smile as he looked at Lingshan's laughing face. Ah! Lingshan jumped in fright and covered her mouth, only reacting when she saw Lin Yi's weird smile. She punched him, blushing as she lowered her head. If you don't like it, then I won't smile like this. Don't. I'm not used to a dumb girl like you smiling without showing your teeth. It's good to be carefree. You're cute when you're heartless, Lenny said. Who's heartless? Lingshan grumbled, but her face was still filled with happiness. Evidently, she was overjoyed at the last 4 words. All right, let's get down to business. Send a summons to all the sects and families in the common world. We need to gather all of them. Exanija's done talking with him. But we don't know how far he'll be able to keep the Archaic Alliance disciples in check. We need to prepare ourselves, Lenny said seriously. All right, should we notify the ancient sects? Lingshan hesitated. The Bureau's jurisdiction was limited to the common world and the hidden world. They didn't have much control over the ancient sections. At most, they could just send a message if something happened, but they might not necessarily give them face. Of course, use my name to notify them. We'll use this chance to re-establish the Bureau's position in the common world. Lenny nodded. If it weren't for this incident, the ancient sects might not have been willing to cooperate with the Bureau, and Lenny might not even have been able to summon them. But now that they'd all lost to the Archaic Alliance, only Lin Yi could stand up for them. They had to come even if they didn't want to. As expected, all the ancient sects, ancient, hidden, and common worlds gathered when the Bureau sent out the summons on behalf of Lin Yi. They all accepted Lin Yi wholeheartedly, saying that they would only listen to the Cultivators' Union. Lin Yi's strength was already outstanding even before he went to Sky-class Island. And now he was so strong that they couldn't even look up to him. There was also the Archaic Alliance, eyeing him like a tiger watching its prey. No one in charge of an area was an idiot, and they naturally knew what to choose. If they didn't hug Lin Yi's thigh tightly now, they'd be waiting for their names to be removed. You're really resourceful. I wouldn't even dare think about reporting to the Occult Investigation Department if it was before. But I'm actually so obedient this time. Lingshan covered her mouth and smiled as she looked at the group of people trying to get to know each other. Times have changed. A wise man submits to circumstances. Lin Yi smiled faintly. Chapter 5086. I would have forgotten if you didn't mention it. Just let him go. After all, I've already talked to Exainegia. It's meaningless to detain him like this. Besides, I have to take care of his food and water. I don't want to cause trouble for your bureau, Linny said casually. Deep in the mountain gate of Shenangjia, the first thing Exainegia did after returning was to report to the Archaic Alliance. Although he verbally promised Lin Yi to mediate, this kind of thing was not something he could decide alone. He had to ask for permission from the higher-ups. Otherwise, it would be unjustifiable, and the disciples of the archaic sects might not listen to him. Besides, for Exainegia, there was another more important thing, which was to report about Lin Yi to the Green Cloud sect of the North Island. This time, they met a senior ancestor in the secular world, which was a big deal for the entire Green Cloud sect of the North Island. In particular, Linny could completely recite the original version of the Green Cloud Calming Manual. This was of great significance to the Green Cloud sect of the North Island, which lacked foundation after the turmoil. If Linny also remembered other advanced mantras, the value would be even more immeasurable. For such a big thing, the best way to report it was, of course, to face. Now that the archaic passage was opened, this condition was met. But Exainegia did not have the courage to do so. It was not that he did not want to, but he had limited spiritual jades. After all, it cost a lot of spiritual jades to send a person in, which was extremely rare in the small Jianghu of the archaic sect. Even Exainegia, an elder of the sect, could barely get a few pieces. It would be a waste to use them just for reporting. Therefore, after thinking about it, he decided to only send 2 letters in. One to the Archaic Alliance, and one to the Green Cloud sect of the North Island. In this way, only a small piece of spiritual jades would be needed. One day later, the Archaic Alliance sent a reply. In principle, they agreed with Exainegia's proposal. After all, for them, as long as they could successfully recruit outstanding disciples, they had no intention to be enemies with the secular world. Therefore, what Exainegia did was just in line with their requirements. On the contrary, if the disciples were allowed to do whatever they wanted, things would inevitably get out of control, and even the entire Archaic Alliance would be enraged. As for the Green Cloud sect of the North Island, there was no reply yet. For one thing, the North Island was far away from the Archaic Passage. For another, such a big thing needed to discuss for a long time, so there would not be a result in a short time. With the approval of the Archaic Alliance, Exainegia immediately issued a summons to the senior brothers who stayed behind at the mountain gate, ordering them to summon their disciples back to Shenangjia. Although these senior brothers were doubtful, they chose to follow the order after seeing the Alliance's approval in Exainegia's hand. A few days later, the disciples who were scattered all over the secular world returned to Shenangjia one after another. Just like the beginning of the trial, they all gathered in the open space on the square, waiting for Exainegia's instructions. Disciples who are in the trial, I believe you all have heard about what happened recently. Some sects tried to recruit disciples ahead of others, but their actions were extremely inappropriate, which seriously damaged the image and reputation of the Archaic Alliance. Therefore, the Archaic Alliance has decided that from now on, all the disciples who are in the trial are not allowed to act recklessly. They must live in peace with the cultivation forces in the secular world, and no coercion is allowed. Violators will be severely punished. Exainegia announced loudly. Everyone could not help but look at each other. In fact, in addition to the Snowsword sect and the Qianquan sect, many other archaic sects had been going overboard recently. In their eyes, it was just a matter of course. After all, they were the masters of the Foundation establishment realm from the Archaic Alliance. They did not need to be polite to these cultivators, who were like ants in the secular world. According to Exainegia's words, if a group of masters of the Foundation establishment realm wanted to do something, they could not force them with their strength. They could only discuss with a group of lowly cultivators in the secular world in a friendly manner. Wasn't this a joke? Impossible. At this time, a voice was suddenly heard from the crowd. Everyone turned around and saw it was Shui Jianfeng, who had just returned from the Supernatural Investigation Bureau. What did you say? Exainegia's face turned gloomy. He was the person in charge of this trial in the secular world, and he even received the approval of the Archaic Alliance. How dare this Xue Jianfeng question the decision of the Archaic Alliance? Was he trying to rebel? Everyone from the other sects looked like they were watching a good show. Although they were a little dissatisfied with what Xue Jianfeng said, they would at most complain in private. They would never dare to question Exainegia to his face. After all, he was the martial uncle appointed by the Archaic Alliance to lead the team. They did not expect Xue Jianfeng to be so daring. I said it's impossible. Xue Jianfeng walked in front of everyone with a cold expression. Previously, he gave off a feeling that he was a high and mighty heavenly genius. However, after his dantian was crippled, his entire temperament changed, turning into a venomous snake that caused people to tremble in fear. This is the decision of the Archaic Alliance. How dare you defy it in public? Who gave you the guts? Exainegia said in an unfriendly tone. He also knew that the other sects might not really take him seriously as the martial uncle, but at least his authority was unquestionable. If he allowed Xue Jianfeng to contradict him in public, he would not be able to lead the team anymore. I didn't say I'm going to defy the decision of the Archaic Alliance. It's fine if you want to live in peace with the secular world. However, there's someone I will never let go of. He's the one who caused me to become like this. I'm irreconcilable with him. Xue Jianfeng said while gnashing his teeth. Now that his dantian was destroyed, he was completely a useless person. Normally, he would have to live with his tail between his legs. He would not dare to be as arrogant as he was now. After all, even if he used to be the big brother of Snow Sword faction, he was just a useless person without any strength. He was useless to the sect now. He could only be abandoned by the sect like Wei Xinjin. However, Xue Jianfeng was different. He was the only son of the vice leader of Snow Sword faction. Even if he lost his strength, he still had a powerful background. Moreover, although his dantian and meridians were destroyed, he could still recover, as long as he could get a grade 5 recover pill. Therefore, he had the confidence and capital to be arrogant. He did not care about the others, but Linny had to die no matter what. Everyone was confused. They only knew that Xue Jianfeng suffered a great loss, and his dantian was destroyed. However, they did not know who dared to do such a thing. There were only two people who knew about it. One was Fei Yongli, and the other was Exainegia. Chapter 5087. It's only right to seek revenge when there's resentment. Even in the small Jianghu of the archaic era, no one could say anything about it. Could it be that we have to swallow our anger in the secular world? How can there be such a logic in this world? Since you're so protective of that person, could it be that you're having an affair with him? Xue Jianfeng frowned suspiciously. Nonsense. No one will stop you if you want to take revenge. But the premise is that you can't destroy the stability of the whole situation. Otherwise, you'll be the sinner of the entire Archaic Alliance. Can you afford to bear this crime? Exainegia said angrily. Uncle Exian, please don't simply accuse me. I just want to seek justice for myself. How can I destroy the stability of the whole situation? How can I be the sinner of the Archaic Alliance? Xue Jianfeng was unconvinced. All right, since you insist on being unreasonable, I'll make it clear to you in front of everyone. Tell me, who do you want to take revenge on? Exainegia snorted coldly. Who else can it be? Of course, it's that primordial spirit cultivator. Xue Jianfeng gritted his teeth. As soon as he said that, the crowd couldn't help but whisper to each other. At this moment, a lady in the crowd was suddenly stunned. It was Lung Lung who rushed back after hearing the news. Primordial spirit cultivator? Lung Lung immediately reacted when she heard the word. She was extremely excited. Wasn't that Linny? Could it be that Linny was alright? Make it clear. Which primordial spirit cultivator? Exainegia said expressionlessly. The one who killed Yin Jiping and Sun Baimei of the evil warding sect, injured Yu Zhengliang and the others of the Qingquan sect, and destroyed my dantian. Is this clear enough, Uncle Exian? Xue Jianfeng said while suppressing his anger. Listening to the things he listed out, The crowd was in an uproar again. Lung Lung was stunned on the spot. Lin Yi had done so many amazing feats during this period of time. One had to know that each of these things were extremely difficult to accomplish. Without the strength of the Great Circle of Foundation establishment, it was basically impossible, especially since Xue Jianfeng was known as the #1 expert in the Archaic Alliance's Foundation establishment realm. Even someone at the Great Circle of Foundation establishment realm would have a hard time crippling his Dantian. Only someone at the Golden Core realm would have a chance. In Lung Lung's impression, Lin Yi's strength was only at the peak of the early stage of foundation building. It was worlds apart from the Gold Core stage. After listening to these words, she suddenly felt incredulous. It had only been less than a month since they last parted. Could it be that Lin Yi's strength had advanced by leaps and bounds to such an extent? Such a thing was simply unimaginable. In the eyes of any normal person, the possibility of it happening was zero. Cold Lung could not help but suspect. Could it be that the primordial spirit cultivator that they were talking about was not Lin Yi, but someone else? Alright, since you've made it so clear, I'll add one more thing. This primordial spirit cultivator is the president of the Cultivators Association in the secular world. At the same time, he's also the ancestral master of the Green Cloud sect in the North Island, who's left in the secular world since the primitive times. Exanijia said in a low voice. What? That primordial spirit cultivator is from the Green Cloud sect in the North Island? Everyone's jaws dropped when they heard that. They looked at each other and were stunned speechless. How? How could this be possible? Xue Jianfeng was also stunned. His expression suddenly became a little complicated. He thought that Lin Yi was just a primordial spirit cultivator from the secular world without any foundation. The Archaic Alliance would definitely not stop him from dealing with an unrelated outsider. However, this guy actually turned out to be the ancestral master of the Green Cloud sect in the North Island. This was a tricky matter. Lung Lung, who was in the crowd, was also a little shocked when she heard that. However, she was more disappointed. In her opinion, since this primordial spirit cultivator was the ancestral master of the Green Cloud sect in the North Island, it would definitely not be Lin Yi, because she had never heard that Lin Yi was related to the Archaic Alliance. Lin Yi did not know anything about the small primitive underworld at all. According to him, he went to a small island to learn martial arts, which had nothing to do with the small primitive underworld at all. After coming to this conclusion, the little hope that had just been ignited in Lung Lung's heart was instantly extinguished. Her heart was filled with melancholy. Why not? Do you think that primordial spirit cultivators appear out of thin air? If he's not the ancestral master left behind from the archaic era, how could he have such powerful strength as a primordial spirit cultivator? Is it strange that he's related to the Green Cloud sect in the North Island? Exanijia asked in return. Humph, even if he's from the Green Cloud sect in the North Island, so what? Is it because of this that he can do whatever he wants? Even if he destroyed my elixir field, I can't seek revenge from him? Your Green Cloud sect is just one of the 10 small sects and families. It's the same with our Snow Sword sect. You're not one of the 4 big sects and families. Since when did you become so overbearing? Xue Jianfeng said indignantly. Not to mention that it was Lin Yi. Even if Exanijia destroyed his elixir field, he could still seek revenge from Exanijia. Even the Green Cloud sect in the North Island could not intervene. If it was a private grudge, then it would be a private matter. If the sect intervened, it would be breaking the rules of the underworld. Besides, the strength of the Snow Sword sect was not weaker than that of the Green Cloud sect in the North Island. Their overall strength was even stronger. Of course, if the 3 sects in the North Island united, the Snow Sword sect would not be able to do anything. Whether the Green Cloud sect in the North Island is overbearing or not is not up to you, a junior. Xue Jianfeng listened carefully. If the Archaic Alliance and the cultivation forces in the secular world want to coexist peacefully, not only the Archaic Alliance needs to restrain ourselves, but also someone needs to restrain the cultivation forces in the secular world. My primordial spirit martial uncle is the leader of the cultivation forces in the secular world. If you dare to touch him, you're challenging all the cultivation forces in the secular world. Once things get out of hand, the Archaic Alliance will never forgive you. Do you understand what I mean? Exainegia threatened. At this point, the meaning was obvious. From Exainegia's point of view, he did not want to make trouble, but he had said so much. If Xue Jianfeng still did not buy it, then he could not blame him for putting a label on him. At that time, he would be accused of openly defying the Archaic Alliance's decision. Even the Snow Sword sect could not guarantee his safety. Although Xue Jianfeng was eager to take revenge, he was not a fool after all. He could only snort to express his dissatisfaction. But he dared not say anything in front of so many people. Seeing that Xue Jianfeng finally chose to retreat, Exainegia secretly felt relieved. He glanced at the others and said, "Who else has an opinion on the Archaic Alliance's decision?" Everyone shook their heads. They were not as miserable as Xue Jianfeng. At most, they would complain in private. Of course, they could not oppose it openly. Chapter 5088. Since no one has any objections, you may leave. I'll discuss with the primordial spirit Martial Uncle Master in a few days, and we'll arrange for the recruitment of disciples from the secular world. During this period of time, if you cause any more scandals like bullying sects in the secular world, you'll have to bear the consequences. Exainegia looked at Xue Jianfeng meaningfully, then turned around and left. The group of primordial sect disciples looked at each other and immediately left. Although they would be restricted in their activities in the secular world in the future, and it was inevitable that they would feel resentful, not many of them had the guts to disobey the order, so they could only choose to obey. However, Xue Jianfeng was different. Although he was rendered speechless by Exainegia in front of everyone, he did not plan to listen to the order at all. He was the number one among the young generation in the Primordial Alliance. Now that his Dantian was destroyed, how could he swallow it? All Snow Sword sect disciples gather. Xue Jianfeng suddenly shouted. The group of Snow Sword sect disciples could not help but look at each other. But in the end, they still gathered together obediently. Although this genius had become a cripple, his identity and background were still there. Furthermore, he was still the big senior brother in name, so they did not dare to ignore him. What orders does big senior brother have? The group of Snow Sword sect disciples asked. Since that primordial spirit cultivator dared to destroy my Dantian, he's the sworn enemy of our Snow Sword sect. He must die. Xue Jianfeng's eyes were filled with hatred. But he's the ancestral master of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. Uncle Master Xian also said that if we touch him, the consequences will be unimaginable. Fei Yongshan cautiously reminded. That old thing Exainegia is trying to protect him by all means. Since when does our Snow Sword sect need to listen to the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island? Xue Jianfeng curled his lips in disdain. What do you mean, senior brother Xue? Fei Yongshan probed. Although that primordial spirit cultivator has some cultivation, he's just a foundation establishment great perfection expert after all. There are so many disciples in our Snow Sword sect. Can't we defeat him alone? Furthermore, he's not alone either. We just have to casually capture a few of the women and lackeys by his side, and it'll be sufficient to make him refrain from taking action. Xue Jianfeng said with a cold smile. Everyone was speechless when they heard this. Not long ago, he was a proud and arrogant child of the heavens. But now, he had actually fallen to the point where he didn't hesitate to use such a despicable method of taking hostages. It was truly lamentable. Xue Jianfeng glanced at their expressions and said with a snort, "Just do as I say. I'll take care of anything that goes wrong. Remember, the essence soul cultivator we're going to deal with is called Lin Yi, and he's currently in East Ocean City." What? He's Lin Yi? Lung Lung cried out in surprise when she heard that. She had already eliminated this possibility in her heart. She didn't expect to receive confirmation from Xue Jianfeng that it was actually Lin Yi. While Lung Lung was overjoyed, she suddenly became the focus of everyone. It was only then that everyone suddenly realized that she had unknowingly become a mid-stage foundation building expert. When she came out to train previously, She was only at the early stage of foundation building. How long had it been? Not even a month and a half had passed, and she had actually advanced 2 levels to the mid-stage of foundation building. She was indeed the core disciple, who was recognized as the most promising to advance to the golden core realm. Her qualifications were simply invincible. Lung Lung's qualifications were indeed nature-defying, but it was impossible for her to advance so quickly just by relying on her qualifications. The medicinal pills that Linny gave her were the key. Once she consumed the foundation-building pill and the foundation-building barrier-breaking pill, in addition to her qualifications advancing 2 levels, it was a matter of course. There was nothing to be surprised about. Xue Jianfeng was also shocked, but his focus was not on this. He walked over and frowned. Could it be that you know Linny? Of course I know him. Back then, Sun Baimei coveted the treasure that master passed down to me. He attacked me and injured me badly. Later on, when I was recovering, he came to kill me and rob me of my treasure. Thanks to Lin Yi, I managed to escape, Lung Lung explained. She only had one purpose in saying all these. She wanted to clear Lin Yi's name. So you have a close relationship with him? Xue Jianfeng's face turned gloomy again. Senior brother Xue, I've been with Lin Yi for half a month. I can guarantee with my life that he's not a bad person. It's all because of him that I'm able to come back alive this time. Moreover, he gave me a bunch of medicinal pills, which allowed me to advance and break through successfully. I can guarantee that he has no intention to be our Snow Sword sect's enemy. There must be some misunderstanding, Lung Lung quickly explained. Everything that Lin Yi had done, she still could not digest it until now. Since when did Lin Yi have such powerful strength and become the senior ancestor of the Green Cloud sect in the North Island? All kinds of doubts lingered in her mind. The image of Lin Yi in Lung Lung's mind became more and more unfathomable. However, even so, she did not think that Lin Yi could be the opponent of the entire Snow Sword sect. After all, the Snow Sword sect not only had a gold core expert, but also a nascent soul-old monster. If he was really identified as the Snow Sword sect's mortal enemy, Lin Yi's situation would bode ill rather than well. Therefore, no matter what, Lung Lung must dispel Xue Jianfeng's hysterical idea of revenge. Currently, Xue Jianfeng's Dantian was only destroyed. As long as there was a 5th grade recover pill, there would be room for negotiation. However, once he started to take revenge, the enmity would only grow bigger. Lung Lung did not care about Xue Jianfeng's life or death, but she was afraid that Lin Yi would be at a disadvantage. Junior sister Lung, our Snow Sword sect valued you so much and gave you so many cultivation resources. In the end, you actually colluded with the enemy. How should you be punished? Xue Jianfeng was interested in Lung Lung at first, but at this time, whoever dared to stop him from taking revenge on Lin Yi would be his enemy. He said angrily, "Misunderstanding? Even my Dantian was destroyed by him. How is this a misunderstanding?" Senior brother Xue, a destroyed Dantian can be restored, but it's better to squash enmity than to keep it alive. You heard what junior uncle Xian said just now. Why do you have to make things unmanageable for a moment of anger? Lung Lung advised earnestly. It's easy for you to say. Repairing the Dantian requires at least a 5th grade recover pill. Do you know how much it costs? Xue Jianfeng snorted coldly. Then, as long as I give you a 5th grade recover pill, will senior brother Xue stop finding trouble with Lin Yi? Lung Lung glanced at him and suddenly took out a pill from her bosom. 5th grade recover pill. Everyone was shocked when they saw it. Each of them looked at Lung Lung with eyes filled with shock. Even in the entire Snow Sword sect, there might not even be one such pill. She actually took it out so casually. Chapter 5089. Where did you get it from? Could it be that your master gave it to you? Xue Jianfeng couldn't hide the jealousy on his face. Even he, the only son of the vice sect master, didn't have it. Lin Yi gave it to me. Now that I'm using it to repair your Dantian, senior brother Xue should be able to keep the peace. Lung Lung secretly rejoiced that Lin Yi had given her a handful of elixirs back then. Otherwise, she really wouldn't know what to do now. If she allowed Xue Jianfeng to cause trouble, The consequences would be unimaginable. Unexpectedly, just when Lung Lung let out a sigh of relief, Xue Jianfeng suddenly snatched the grade 5 recover pill from her hand and shouted, "Disciples, listen up! Lung Lung colluded with the enemy and violated the sect rules. Lock her up." You. Lung Lung was innocent. How could she expect this person to be so despicable? He actually turned hostile after snatching the medicinal pill. The other Snow Sword sect disciples were stunned too. Even they didn't expect such a thing to happen. Xue Jianfeng had always been upright. Why did he suddenly become so sinister and despicable? What are you waiting for? Why aren't you taking her down? Don't tell me you want to rebel too? Xue Jianfeng said angrily. Yes. Everyone could only bite the bullet and surround Lung Lung. Although Lung Lung was a core disciple that was highly valued by the sect, her status was still far from Xue Jianfeng's. They had no choice. Lung Lung was immediately angry and anxious. However, she couldn't make a move in front of her fellow disciples. Moreover, she couldn't make a move either. Otherwise, she would be accused of betraying the sect. Then everything would be over. Senior brother Xue, please calm down. I think junior sister Lung is just stating the facts. She doesn't have the intention to become senior brother Xue's enemy. There's no need to make things so awkward between fellow disciples, right? Fei Yongxing bit the bullet and came forward to persuade. Compared to Xue Jianfeng, the deterrence that Lin Yi brought to him was much greater. Now was the perfect opportunity to sell a favor in front of Lung Lung. This way, even if Lung Lung and Lin Yi reunited in the future, she wouldn't say anything bad about him. Only then would he have the chance to keep his life. Colluding with my Snow Sword sect's mortal enemy, and now you're even speaking up for Lin Yi. Is this a matter of fact? Fei Yongxing, I still haven't settled the score with you for deserting the last time. You still have the face to stand out and plead for her? Xue Jianfeng looked at him with an unkind expression. Fei Yongxing was terrified. This was because Xue Jianfeng didn't know the truth. He thought that Fei Yongxing had escaped after Lin Yi destroyed his dantian and fainted. If Xue Jianfeng knew that Fei Yongxing didn't escape at all, but became Lin Yi's spy, not only would Lung Lung be locked up today, but Fei Yongxing would also suffer. What are you waiting for? Xue Jianfeng glared at the disciples of the Snow Sword School again. Fortunately, he was now a cripple. Otherwise, he would have taken action himself. Everyone was about to make a move when Lung Lung suddenly said, "Hold on. Although you're the eldest senior brother, I'm still a core disciple. You have no right to imprison me. I want to see my master. This time, I'll be the one leading the team in the common world. Everything will be decided by me." Xue Jianfeng smiled coldly. Seeing the hesitation on everyone's faces, he added, "Don't worry, I'll only imprison you for now. As for how to deal with you, I'll ask the higher-ups of the sect." At this point, the disciples of the Snow Sword School didn't hesitate any longer. They didn't want to get involved in a fight between core disciples. They followed Xue Jianfeng's orders and locked Lung Lung up. Lung Lung was unhappy, but she didn't make a move because she was from the same sect. After locking Lung Lung up, Xue Jianfeng immediately sent a letter back to the Snow Sword School, exaggerating the story. In his description, he was undoubtedly the innocent victim. In the end, it was all because of Lung Lung and Lin Yi that his dantian was destroyed. As for him threatening Lingshan and the others, he didn't mention it at all. 2 days later, the higher-ups of the Snow Sword School replied, ordering Xue Jianfeng to send Lung Lung back to the sect to be dealt with. At the same time, he was disqualified from the training in the common world. This result was within Xue Jianfeng's expectations, because this was a letter written by his father himself. His son's dantian was destroyed. As the vice-headmaster of the Snow Sword School, it would be strange if his father could swallow this humiliation. Even if Lung Lung was a core disciple, so what? Was Xue Jianfeng any worse than her? Xue Jianfeng was the #1 foundational practitioner in the Archaic Alliance. Putting aside whether he lived up to his name, being able to fight for such a huge title was a reflection of his strength. Not to mention that he had the vice-headmaster of the Snow Sword School as his father. His background was much stronger than Lung Lung's. Under such circumstances, even Lung Lung's master couldn't say much. At most, he could only try to reduce Lung Lung's punishment. It was impossible for her to get away scot-free. At least she wouldn't be able to get past the vice headmaster. Look carefully. This is the decision of the sect's higher-ups. Does anyone have any objections? Xue Jianfeng took out the sect's reply and circulated it in front of everyone. Everyone immediately shook their heads. Not to mention that Lung Lung had always been cold and had an ordinary relationship with them. Even if they had a good relationship with her, they couldn't plead for her now. The sect was the most important. Since this was the decision of the sect's higher-ups, every disciple had to follow it unconditionally. I'm not going back. Lung Lung panicked. Now that she knew Lin Yi's whereabouts, how could she return to the archaic underworld without meeting Lin Yi? One should know that the archaic passage would only open once every 1,000 years. If she was sent back this time, she might not be able to see Lin Yi again in this lifetime. Moreover, after the training in the secular world ended, the primeval trials would be next. This was the most important trial for the disciples of the various sections. Once they missed it, it meant that they might miss a great opportunity. How could she be sent back to the Snow Sword School to be punished at this time? Hehe, this is the sect's decision. Do you think it's a joke? You won't go back just because you say so? Does your family own the Snow Sword School? Xue Jianfeng sneered and immediately left. I'll go find Xanijia to make arrangements. You just wait for your punishment when you return. Lung Lung was angry and anxious at the same time. However, there was nothing she could do at this time. It was impossible even if she wanted to run away. The disciples of the Snow Sword School were watching her from all sides. With her foundation building intermediate stage strength, it was not enough for her to break out of the encirclement alone. Moreover, doing so would only give others an excuse, and the consequences would be even more unimaginable. Chapter 50-90. On the other side, Xue Jianfeng found Xanijia and said, Snow Sword faction has given the order to send Lung Lung back to the faction for punishment. I'm going to use the primordial passage. I'm sure you won't stop me, right? Xanijia glanced at him and said, That's your Snow Sword faction's internal matter. As long as you prepare the spiritual jades, I won't stop you. Very well. I'll prepare the spiritual jades now. Xue Jianfeng immediately turned around and left. Although he was distressed that he had to pay a few spiritual jades to deal with Lung Lung, it was an official matter. He could get a new one from the faction. With his background, he could even get a few more spiritual jades by falsely claiming the number. Looking at Xue Jianfeng's back as he left, Xanijia shook his head disdainfully. What an arrogant young man. Before the accident, he still pretended to be a decent man. I really thought that he was a rare young talent. Unexpectedly, his true colors were revealed after his elixir field was destroyed. With such a narrow-minded character, even if his elixir field was restored, he would not be able to become a great person. Not long after Xue Jianfeng left, another person came to see him. It was Fei Yongsheng. Why are you here? Does Granduncle have any orders? Xanijia asked. In his eyes, Fei Yongsheng was no longer a disciple of Snow Sword faction, but a representative of Lin Yi. After all, it was Fei Yongsheng who brought him the message. You misunderstood Granduncle Xian. But this is indeed related to Senior Lin. Fei Yongsheng paused and asked. Was Xue Jianfeng going to send Lung Lung back to the primordial underworld? That's right. This is an internal matter of Snow Sword faction. I have no reason to stop him. What does this have to do with Granduncle Xian? Xanijia asked curiously. You may not know this, Granduncle Xian. Lung Lung and Senior Lin are close. If she is sent back to Snow Sword faction, Senior Lin will be furious. We have to think of a way, Fei Yongsheng said worriedly. Xanijia was stunned and had a weird expression on his face. Although Lin Yi looked young on the outside, he was an ancient being from the ancient times in his heart. He did not expect Lin Yi to be with a little girl like Cold. Wasn't this like an old cow robbing the cradle? What's wrong? Fei Yongsheng asked curiously. Oh, nothing. Xanijia hurriedly got rid of the weird thought in his mind and said with a bitter smile. The problem is that this is an internal affair of Snow Sword School. Even if I'm the leader of the team in the secular world this time, it's not appropriate for me to directly interfere with the affairs of other schools. This is a taboo. Fei Yongxing choked and said helplessly. Then what should we do? Are we going to just watch as Lung Lung is escorted back to Snow Sword School? Exionijia thought for a while and said, how about this? Although I can't stop them directly, it's not a problem for me to delay them a little. Go and inform Grand Uncle, and ask him to come here as soon as possible. Okay, I'll go now. Fei Yongxing nodded and set off. An hour later, Xue Jianfeng's side was ready. He brought Lingyu and Cold to the teleportation formation of the primordial passage, but was stopped by Exionijia. What do you mean by this? Xue Jianfeng's face sank. Nothing. The primordial passage has sent 5 to 6 letters in the past 2 days. It needs to be maintained. If you want to use it, wait until tomorrow. Exionijia said indifferently. Xue Jianfeng almost went mad. Maintain the primordial passage? What kind of bullshit reason is that? Since when did Exionijia, a mere beginner gold core expert, know how to maintain the teleportation formation of the primordial passage? Grand Uncle Exion, this is the internal affairs of our Snow Sword School. You can't possibly stop us from doing this, right? This is not a small matter. Aren't you afraid that our Snow Sword School will tell on you? Don't you want to stand firmly in the primordial alliance ever again? Xue Jianfeng threatened with an unfriendly expression. What internal affairs? My duty is to maintain the primordial passage, but it has become the internal affairs of your Snow Sword School. How arrogant! Exionijia said in disdain. You know I'm not talking about this. You didn't maintain it earlier or later, but when I want to use it, you suddenly want to maintain it. Isn't it a little too obvious that you're abusing your position for personal revenge? Xue Jianfeng sneered. Although Exionijia was the grand uncle leading the team, they were about to fall out. Naturally, their words were full of gunpowder. You're thinking too much. As the leading martial uncle for this trip in the secular world, maintaining the primordial passage is the most important of all responsibilities. Everything has already been arranged. I'm not so narrow-minded that I'll take revenge on a junior like you, Exionijia said faintly. Xue Jianfeng was speechless for a while. His face turned pale. He was no match for Exionijia, in terms of experience and shrewdness, when it came to arguing with an old man like Exionijia. After a while he could only say, all right, there's a limit to maintaining the primordial passage. When can I use it? 2 days later, Exionijia said casually. 2 days was his limit. If he insisted on delaying it, it would not be justifiable. All right, I'll wait for you for 2 days. Xue Jianfeng turned around and left with his people while gnashing his teeth. After taking 2 steps, he seemed to have thought of something and said loudly on purpose. All disciples of Snow Sword School, listen up. Keep a close eye on Lung Lung these 2 days. There must be at least 4 people on duty at all times. I'd like to see who's so daring to meddle in the internal affairs of Snow Sword School. Exionijia was speechless and twitched his mouth. This guy actually thought that he was delaying to take the opportunity to let Lung Lung go. Did he look so stupid? 2 days passed in a flash. Shenangjia Mountain Gate was peaceful. Xue Jianfeng brought his people to the primordial passage again. The first thing he said when he saw Exionijia was, what excuse do you have now to delay? Delay? When did I delay you? You're deceiving yourself. Exionijia glanced at him indifferently, but he was a little anxious. If Leni did not come at this time, he had no reason to continue delaying. Exionijia was anxious, but Lung Lung was even more anxious than him. She did not know that Fei Yongxing had already sent a message to Leni. At this moment, she was having a final fierce struggle in her mind. Should she continue to endure and be escorted back to Snow Sword School? Or should she resist without caring about anything? Thinking about it carefully, she realized that she couldn't bear the consequences of either of these 2 choices. She could either say goodbye to Leni forever, or she could be accused of betraying the sect. There had to be one of the 2. Chapter 5091. Seeing that the primordial passage was getting closer and closer, Lung Lung was anxious. She clenched her fists tightly and was about to strike. Between the Snow Sword School and Lin Yi, she chose Lin Yi in the end. In order to see Lin Yi again, she would not hesitate to bear the crime of betraying the school. However, just when she could not help but strike, a familiar voice came from behind. Wait, she can't leave. Lin Yi. Lung Lung quickly turned around and looked at the familiar figure that she had been yearning for day and night. She could not help but burst into tears. In fact, she did not ask for much. As long as she could see Lin Yi for the last time, and let her know that Lin Yi was safe and sound, it was enough. It's you. Xue Jianfeng had never thought that Lin Yi would come here. He looked at Xianijia, who looked indifferent, and Fei Yongxing, who appeared behind Lin Yi. Suddenly, he understood everything and scolded. Fei Yongxing, you traitor! Fei Yongxing was shocked. Seeing Xue Jianfeng's murderous look, he quickly hid behind Lin Yi. When he heard that Xue Jianfeng brought people to the primordial passage when he returned to the mountain gate, he immediately led Lin Yi here, without thinking too much. He did not expect to be called a traitor by Xue Jianfeng on the spot. Of course, he was a traitor. Lin Yi did not care about Xue Jianfeng at all. He walked to Lung Lung in front of everyone and smiled. Wait for me, I'll be done soon. She didn't know why, but from the moment she saw Lin Yi, Lung Lung's heart immediately calmed down. It was as if as long as Lin Yi was here, she wouldn't have to be afraid even if the sky fell down. She felt an unprecedented sense of security. However, she still pursed her lips and curled up the corner of her mouth. She said softly, You're bragging. Looking at the two flirting as if there was no one else around, Xue Jianfeng almost went mad. He scolded the disciples of the Snow Sword School. Are you all blind? This is the Lin Yi who crippled my Dantian. He is an enemy of our Snow Sword School. Hurry up and kill him. How dare you? Don't blame me for being merciless if anyone dares to harm the Grand Uncle Master of the Green Cloud sect of the North Island. Xianijia immediately stood up and snorted. The disciples of the Snow Sword School were shocked. If Xianijia was not here, they might have been instigated by Xue Jianfeng to attack Lin Yi. But now, facing Xianijia, an expert in the early stage of Gold Elixir realm, what could they do even if they had more people? Moreover, if they were to compare the number of people, the Green Cloud sect of the North Island was not less than the Snow Sword School at all. They were both one of the 10 small sects and families. In terms of strength, they were almost on the same level. If necessary, they could even mobilize the people of the Soaring sect and the Xuanji sect. The three sects of the North Island had always been on the same side. The Snow Sword School might not be able to afford to offend them. Seeing the other disciples of the Snow Sword School were scared, Xue Jianfeng was so angry that he gnashed his teeth. He could not help but want to attack by himself. However, he was scared by Lin Yi's glance. Thinking of the time when he was tortured by Lin Yi, his heart could not help but tremble. Facing Lin Yi alone was simply courting death. Oh, it seems that you have recovered. You snatched the grade 5 recover pill that I gave to Colt. You didn't even say thank you. Now you want to kill me? Said Lin Yi with an unfriendly expression. On the way here, he had heard everything from Fei Yongxing. He did not find it strange that Xue Jianfeng could recover his Dantian and meridians, nor did he take it to heart. Xue Jianfeng might be very strong in the eyes of others, but in his eyes, he was just a weakling. A weakling that was not even worth a fart. How dare you? You destroyed my Dantian, and became the mortal enemy of the Snow Sword School. And you still dare to come here? Do you really think that there is no one in the Snow Sword School who can deal with you? Said Xue Jianfeng, flustered and exasperated. If you think that someone can deal with me, just go and call him over. I'll wait here. Lin Yi smiled coldly. Although he was only at the peak of the Foundation establishment level, he was still a powerful existence comparable to the giants of the mountain opening period. He was not even afraid of the Snow Sword School on the Heaven Island. So how could he be afraid of a knockoff of the Ancient Alliance? You! Xue Jianfeng was speechless. He wanted to call his father over to vent his anger. But the problem was that without the approval of the Ancient Alliance, it was impossible. Apart from Exionejia, the leader of the Snow Sword School, only the disciples in the foundation establishment level could participate in the training in the secular world. It was an irrefutable rule that no one could defy. You can't call me over? Then I'll give you a piece of advice. I've always had a bad temper, so don't complain in front of me. Otherwise, I'll accidentally destroy your dantian again. Or maybe just stomp you to death. That wouldn't be good. Don't you think so? Linny said with a smile on his face. Don't you agree? How dare you threaten me? Xue Jianfeng was so angry that his mouth became crooked. He pointed at Exionejia and said, You're the leader of the Snow Sword School. This guy is threatening me in public. And you're not going to do anything? Threatenin'? Where's the threat coming from? Granduncle Master is just discussing with you nicely. How is this a threat? Exionejia snorted disdainfully. Xue Jianfeng had just recovered his dantian and meridians with the help of the 5th grade recover pill. His body was far from recovering to its normal state. He was so angry that he almost fainted. He managed to hold his breath and said, All right, then you guys just wait and see. Guards, send Lung Lung back to the Snow Sword School first. I'm sorry, Lung Lung has been requisitioned by me. She can't leave, said Linny. What did you say? This is the internal affairs of the Snow Sword School. According to the rules of the ancient underworld, we can fight back on the spot no matter who interferes. Exionejia, even you can't say anything about this, right? Xue Jianfeng snorted. Exionejia frowned. It was indeed inappropriate for him to stand up for Lung Lung in this situation. He could only look at Lin Yi and let Lin Yi make the decision himself. Ehe, you're thinking too much. This isn't just the internal affairs of the Snow Sword School. It's also related to the entire secular world and the Archaic Alliance. How can you send her back just because you want to? Lin Yi curled his lips in disdain. Bullshit. She's just an ordinary disciple. How is she related to the entire secular world and the Archaic Alliance? Xue Jianfeng retorted. Chapter 5092. What does this have to do with Lung Lung? Xue Jianfeng snorted coldly. Of course it has something to do with it. Naturally, there will be a middleman for such a big matter. I represent the secular world's cultivation forces. Ijia represents the Immemorial Alliance. And Lung Lung is the middleman chosen by both sides. Without her, this disciple selection can't be held. This is going against the entire Immemorial Alliance and the secular world. Are you sure your Snow Sword sect has the guts to do so? Lin Yi asked. This, Xue Jianfeng, didn't know how to respond for a moment. He wanted to forcefully escort Lung Lung back, to be punished out of selfishness. If he really investigated it, it would be untenable. Now that Lin Yi had pulled out the title of the middleman, if he still insisted on doing things his own way, he would definitely make a big deal out of it. At that time, things would get out of hand. Let's go. Lin Yi no longer paid attention to this clown. He smiled and pulled Lung Lung's hand and left. Xue Jianfeng couldn't help but want to stop them. However, when he was glanced at by Lin Yi, he immediately retreated back in fear. His expression was brilliant. Of course, he was unwilling to just watch the two leave, but what else could he do? At this time, the immemorial passage had been activated. Xue Jianfeng even wanted to go back himself. As long as he made up some excuses and asked his father to go to the Immemorial Alliance, there might be a chance to find a gold core expert to deal with Lin Yi. However, this kind of thing couldn't be guaranteed to succeed. The key was that Lin Yi was the martial uncle of the Northern Island Azure Cloud sect. Since the Snow Sword sect could call for help, the Northern Island Azure Cloud sect could naturally call for help as well. Moreover, Exionejia was the martial uncle who led the team. If he wanted to use this method to deal with Lin Yi, the success rate was very slim. After thinking about it, Xue Jianfeng could only choose to endure. He wanted to take revenge, so he could only endure. He could only wait for the right opportunity to wash away his shame. On the other side, Lin Yi and Lung Lung were strolling hand in hand on the path of the mountain gate. They were enjoying the primitive scenery of Shenangjia, while enjoying the two of them. Lung Lung could not help but sneak a peek at Lin Yi. At this moment, she actually had thousands of words to say, but she did not know what to say. She had a stomach full of words, but she did not know how to express them. She could only silently let Lin Yi lead her along. The two of them suddenly opened their mouths at the same time. Then, they were both stunned for a moment. They looked at each other and smiled. Then they said at the same time, "Then you go first." "The two of us are really in sync too tacit." Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh, and then said, "How have you been recently?" "All I did was find a secluded cave to cultivate. I relied on the pills you gave me to level up 2 times in a row. Other than that, there was nothing special." Cold smiled coldly. Leveling up 2 levels in a row was a great thing for most people. But it was nothing compared to Lin Yi's. "You're different though. You've done so many shocking things. And now you're the founder of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. What's going on?" Lin Yi asked impatiently. "What's going on? Actually, this is all thanks to you." Lin Yi smiled. "Thanks to me?" Lung Lung blinked her eyes in confusion. "Yes. Originally, I was seriously injured that time. This primordial spirit was about to collapse, so I wanted to quickly release myself and return to my original body. After cultivating for a while, I would project a new primordial spirit to the secular world. I didn't expect that the charcoal you left me would actually contain unparalleled divine sense energy. Not only did it help me to restabilize my primordial spirit that was about to collapse, but it also helped me to quickly restore my strength to the great completion of Foundation establishment. It's a good thing," Lin Yi sighed. "If it wasn't for Lung Lung, this piece of starring charcoal, the secular world would have been in a mess. It's good that it's useful to you. To be honest, that thing is actually useless to me. At most, it can only nourish my divine sense a little. It's precious and useless. At first, I planned to leave it in the primordial little Jianghu and not bring it out. Fortunately, I didn't do that. Otherwise, something big would have happened." Lung Lung couldn't help but rejoice. This thing is indeed useless to a Foundation establishment expert. However, when you reach a certain level, its value will naturally be reflected. This is a priceless treasure, Lin Yi said seriously. In Lin Yi's opinion, it was actually not a good thing to give this thing to a Foundation establishment expert like Lung Lung. It was just that Lung Lung didn't know how to use it. Otherwise, if she really knew how to use it, it might cause a tragedy. After all, the divine sense energy contained in it was too huge. If the primordial spirit wasn't strong enough, it would definitely be crushed in an instant. If the primordial spirit was light, the primordial spirit would be injured. If the primordial spirit was heavy, it would die on the spot. However, when one reached the nascent soul stage, especially his current profound ascension stage, the divine sense energy contained in this thing was truly a priceless treasure. "Then I'll leave it for you," Lung Lung said casually. After going through life and death together last time, the relationship between her and Lin Yi was no longer an ordinary friendship. At least in her heart, she would never have another man in this life. That was why she felt at ease when Lin Yi gave her the medicinal pill. Similarly, she wouldn't be stingy with her own things for Lin Yi, even if this was a treasure passed down to her by her master. "Okay, then I'll keep it." Lin Yi didn't hold back. He wouldn't be stingy with his own people, and similarly, he wouldn't be polite with his own people. "Now can you tell me who you are? How did you become the ancestor of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island?" Lung Lung asked again. Ever since she learned about Lin Yi's news, she had been thinking about it for the past few days. She could more or less guess that Lin Yi had recovered. However, he suddenly became the ancestor of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. This was puzzling. "If I say that this is a lie, would you believe me?" Lin Yi said with a faint smile. "Impossible. You might be able to lie to others about this kind of thing, but Martial Uncle Xian is the elder of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. You can't lie to him." Lung Lung shook her head decisively. "Alright, actually it's not purely a lie. With my origin, it's not a big deal for Xianigia to call me Martial Uncle." Lin Yi nodded. So you're saying that you're really a primordial spirit left behind from the immemorial era? Lung Lung suddenly had a horrified expression, as if she was looking at a monster. Although she had now confirmed the relationship between them, she still couldn't accept that Lin Yi was really such an ancient existence. Do I look like one to you? Lin Yi laughed. Chapter 5093. However, if Lin Yi was not a primordial spirit realm old monster, left behind from the primordial age, how could he be related to the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island? Yeah, I actually told you about my background a long time ago, but you thought I was joking and didn't take it to heart at all. Lin Yi smiled. You mean the island where you learn martial arts? Lung Lung asked. That's right. Actually, you should have heard of the name of that island. It's the legendary Heaven Stage Island. Lin Yi decided to reveal the truth. What? Heaven Stage Island? Isn't that just a rumor? Lung Lung was shocked. It's not a rumor. I came back from Heaven Stage Island. According to my speculation, Heaven Stage Island has a deep relationship with your primordial underworld. Lin Yi nodded. Deep relationship? Where did that come from? Lung Lung was a little surprised. The existence of Heaven Stage Island was shocking enough, but it actually had a deep relationship with the primordial underworld? Heaven Stage Island is divided into 5 major islands: North, South, East, West, and Central. The North Island is led by the 3 major pavilions, namely Soaring Sky Pavilion, Mysterious Pavilion, and Blue Cloud Pavilion. The Central Island has Snowsword Faction, Thousand Blades Faction, and other sections. Don't you think it sounds familiar? Lin Yi smiled. How? How is this possible? Lung Lung was stunned. How could there be such a coincidence in this world? Not only that, the Heaven Stage Island's North Island's Blue Cloud Pavilion's entry-level heart cultivation method is Green Cloud Heart Calming Technique. The Primordial Alliance's North Island's Blue Cloud sect also has the Green Cloud Heart Calming Technique. It might be a coincidence that the names are the same, but it can't be a coincidence that even the cultivation method is the same, right? Lin Yi said. According to what you said, it's really a deep relationship. Lung Lung was stunned. It took her a while to digest Lin Yi's words. She could not help but ask, did you tell Uncle Master Xian about Heaven Stage Island? Not yet. Before I figure out what's going on with the Archaic Alliance, I don't plan on making it public. Keep it a secret from them for now. Lin Yi shook his head. This was not a trivial matter. It was hard to predict whether it would be a blessing or a curse if he spread it out before he really figured it out. At the moment, it was better to confirm his identity as the ancestor of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island first. At least in terms of dealing with the affairs of the secular world, this identity was the most advantageous. All right. Lung Lung nodded. She didn't think too much about it. Since Lin Yi asked her to keep it a secret, she would keep it a secret for now. The two of them talked for a while and returned to the mountain gate when it was getting dark. Xi and Ijia had already asked people to prepare a dinner. Although this place was inaccessible, it was natural and primitive. It was convenient to get local ingredients, so the dinner was delicious. Uncle Master, there's something I'd like to ask. In fact, it's not only me, but also the higher-ups of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. What's your plan in the future? Are you going to stay in the secular world, or go to the small Jianghu of the Archaic era with me? Xi and Ijia asked carefully during the dinner. Since he reported the situation last time, after 5 days, he finally got a reply from the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island. After learning about the existence of Lin Yi, the ancestor of the Archaic era, the whole Blue Cloud sect in the North Island was in an uproar, especially after knowing that there was a complete version of the Blue Cloud calming technique. They were even more ecstatic. With the existence of such a living fossil ancestor, the people of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island definitely wanted to invite Lin Yi over. After all, as long as the Uncle Master taught them a few mental cultivation methods, they would be priceless treasures. But the problem was that Lin Yi's current identity was the president of the Cultivators Association in the secular world. What if he was unwilling to go to the small Jianghu of the archaic era? Don't you have a year of experience in the secular world? Let's talk about this later. I haven't thought about it yet. Linny said noncommittally. If the conditions allowed, he didn't mind going to the small Jianghu of the archaic era. But now he was just a primordial spirit projected here. Who knew if he would suddenly collapse when he went to the small Jianghu of the archaic era? Moreover, even if he had the star inkstone to replenish his divine sense energy, no one knew how long he could last. Maybe a year was the limit. Well, okay. Xianijia couldn't help feeling a little disappointed, but he didn't dare to say anything more. Although Lin Yi was just a primordial spirit in the peak of Foundation establishment, he was the ancestor of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island after all. It was a big crime to disrespect a teacher, not to mention that he was an uncle master whose seniority was unknown. Since I'm here, let's talk about the disciple selection contest. I've already spread the news. All the cultivation forces in the secular world have agreed to send their disciples to participate. You can decide the time and place. Linny turned and said, Okay, it's better to do it sooner rather than later. How about the day after tomorrow? As for the place, let's set this mountain gate. Xianijia suggested. Oh, revealing your rendezvous point to the outside world like this. Aren't you afraid of attracting unnecessary trouble? Linny asked, surprised. Uncle Master, you must be joking. Apart from masters like you, other cultivation forces in the secular world can only be bullied by the disciples of the Archaic Alliance. There won't be any trouble, Xianijia said disapprovingly. Hee, that's true. Although that was what he said, Linny didn't take it seriously. The strength of the cultivators in the secular world was indeed far inferior to that of the Archaic Alliance. However, these people from the Archaic Alliance made the most common mistake of cultivators. They didn't take ordinary people seriously. The reason why the secular world was the secular world was because it was a world of mortals, especially a world with advanced technology. If they were to really become enemies, any high-tech weapons would be enough to make the high and mighty Archaic Alliance cultivators suffer. If they were to really push them into a corner and fire a nuclear bomb, the people here might be fine, but their formations and bases might be gone. Xianijia and the others did not have a deep understanding of the technology in the secular world. Once they understood what advanced technology was, they would not dare to be so careless and unscrupulous anymore, especially after they had experienced hardships. After the discussion, Linny gave Lingshan a call, asking the department to organize the disciple selection contest. Not only would they be able to maintain order, but they'd also be able to establish the department's authority. It was killing two birds with one stone. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye, and practitioners from all over the common world gathered in Shenangjia. The ancient, hidden, and common world sects and houses were all gathered once more, led by the secret investigation department into the depths of Shenangjia. Lingshan was the one leading the group. Chapter 5094. And when they saw the 78 Foundation establishment experts from the Archaic Alliance, they couldn't help but gulp. To them, any random Heavenly Tao Realm expert was enough of a deterrent. But with 78 Foundation establishment experts standing together, the pressure was enough to leave anyone dumbfounded. They couldn't help but feel lucky that Linny had come out to mediate the situation. Otherwise, all the practitioners in the mortal world would have been wiped out. The Archaic Alliance really was a force to be reckoned with. Due to the previous conflicts and disturbances, the cultivators in the secular world didn't have a good impression of the Archaic Alliance. But now that they felt the difference in strength, they couldn't help but feel a sense of respect. If they joined the Archaic Alliance, they would have a chance to become a Heavenly Tao expert like these people. That would be a rare opportunity. At this moment, everyone finally began to look forward to joining the Archaic Alliance. Originally, many of them were just here to go through the motions, so that they wouldn't cause trouble for their sects or families. But now, they sincerely hoped that they would be chosen. Under Lingshan's lead, the practitioners sat down in the square, waiting for the selection to begin. Lingshan, on the other hand, ran to Lin Yi's side, looking at Lung curiously. "Who's this?" Lin Yi blushed, pinching his nose awkwardly. "This is Lung, a disciple of the Snow Sword School of the Archaic Alliance. I told you guys before, she's one of us." "One of us?" Lingshan paused, understanding quickly. She couldn't help but roll her eyes at Lin Yi, extending a hand to Lung. "Nice to meet you. I'm Lingshan, the Vice Director of the Mortal World's Supernatural Investigation Department. I'm also one of this Big Playboy Radish's people. Please take care of me in the future." "Big Playboy Radish?" Lung giggled, grabbing Lingshan's hand and mimicking her. "Please take care of me in the future." She had a cold personality, but she didn't push Lingshan away. After all, Lin Yi had told her about this 2 days ago, and the archaic Jianghu was similar to Sky-class Island. It wouldn't be strange for a man as strong as Lin Yi to have many women. If Lin Yi didn't have any, she'd be suspicious of Lin Yi's sexual orientation. As Lin Yi was having his family meeting, Exionejia had officially started the first round of selection. The rules were simple. The disciples from the archaic sects would be chosen, and if the practitioners weren't chosen by any of the archaic sects, they'd be eliminated and be sent home. As for those who were chosen, they'd be able to stay and enter the second round. If they were talented enough to be chosen by a few archaic sects, it'd be up to them. The disciples sent by the archaic sects weren't just there to make up the numbers, they were all elites. Otherwise, the disciple selection would be meaningless, and the Archaic Alliance would definitely use this opportunity to make things difficult for them. As a result, after the first round, there were 33 people left. This result was far beyond Exionejia's expectations. The archaic sects had very strict standards when it came to disciple selection. He'd expected 7 or 8 to pass the first round, and it'd be a good result. The common world was indeed full of talented people, and it was only because the qi in the air was too thin that it declined. Otherwise, their overall strength wouldn't be much weaker than the Archaic Alliance. After sending away the failed practitioners, Exionejia was about to announce the rules of the second round of selection, when Xue Jianfeng suddenly jumped out and shouted, "Wait! Since this is the disciple selection that the Archaic Alliance and the common world have agreed on, the common world can't just handle it casually, right? Otherwise, where would the Archaic Alliance's face be? There are 33 people left in the first round, and even your Snow Sword sect has chosen 4 of them. How is this handling the matter?" Exionejia frowned and said in a deep voice, "Having more people doesn't mean they're sincere. Martial Uncle Exion, let me ask you a question first. If someone becomes a heaven stage full cycle expert in the common world, is this person considered a talent with unlimited potential?" Xue Jianfeng asked with a deep meaning. "Of course." Exionejia nodded. With the thin qi in the common world and the poor cultivation resources, it was at least 100 times harder to reach heaven stage full cycle than it was in the Archaic Alliance. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that one had unlimited potential. If the common world is really sincere, then shouldn't these people participate in the disciple selection? But as far as I know, there are still many heaven stage full cycle experts who aren't here today, and those people are his subordinates. Martial Uncle Exion, as the martial uncle leading the team, shouldn't you do something about it? Xue Jianfeng pointed the spearhead at Lin Yi. Exionejia looked at Lin Yi in a difficult position, and didn't know how to answer. The Archaic Alliance and the common world were sincerely cooperating to hold this disciple selection. At least logically speaking, those heaven stage full cycle experts shouldn't be absent. Xue Jianfeng, you really don't change. Last time, you suffered because of this. It's only been a few days, and you've already forgotten the pain. Don't you have a good memory? Lin Yi looked at Xue Jianfeng in an unfriendly manner. The scene of him being one-sidedly trampled by Lin Yi was still vivid in his mind. Xue Jianfeng subconsciously took a few steps back in fear. After a while, he reacted with a flushed face and snorted coldly. This is the Archaic Alliance's territory. If you dare to act recklessly, you'll be challenging the archaic alliance in public. Everyone has the right to punish you. This is Shenangjia. Since when did it become the archaic alliance's territory? But it seems that you still have a good memory. It seems that the beating last time wasn't in vain. Lenny curled his lips with a smile that didn't seem like a smile. There's a basic rule to this disciple's selection, and that's that it's fair and voluntary. It's up to the individual to decide whether they want to come or not. Otherwise, the selection would be meaningless. If you can't even understand that, then you really have a problem with your intelligence. Hurry up and find a place to top up, or you'll get a negative score. Lenny said. You're tuning in to the Lee May's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.